Wasim here, so we do now have a quorum of advisory. So I suppose since we have a quorum, I'll at least call the meeting to order. I won't start any meaningful discussion until we get a couple more, but can I get a motion to open the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All right, let's vote on that. Mark?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Wasim?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Aye.
And I'm also an aye, so that's enough to open the meeting at least. Brendan Daly has just joined. I won't ask him to vote on opening the meeting yet. All right, so let's see, we've got 6 advisory members. We're missing Steve Leahy, Jane Matarazzo, and Natalie Weir. Oh, and Jane is here now. All right, but I will at least start by reading the agenda. So first we have addition of topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance. Do we have any additions? All right, hearing none, then we will have liaison reports, followed by current meeting items, which will be annual town meeting 2022 warrant article discussions. So today we're going to be doing Article 11, which is the capital improvement plan. So we will have these in the numbers here, I believe, are no longer correct because there's a new draft of the warrant. So I'm not going to read the numbers, but I'll read the items. So it's a gate and fence replacement, engineering service for Maple and Washington Street Roundabout, town buildings and facilities, stormwater MS4 compliance, DPW equipment, roadway management, tree removal. Then Article 30, citizens petition, Rockwood Street maintenance and updates. Then we will have budget discussions, continued discussions on the sustainability department and the Recreation Commission. And then we will need to discuss capital item funding sources. And then we'll do previous meeting minutes. And one, I won't say amendment to the agenda, but I know Jeannie Guthrie is the one who is going to be talking about the gate and fence replacements, but I believe she is in a ZBA meeting right now. So we're just gonna keep bumping that down until she is able to join us. Other than that, does anybody have any questions or comments about the agenda? All right. All right, Natalie Weir is here now. So seeing none, and I do actually, I believe Steve Leahy told me he was not going to be able to be here tonight. So this is everybody. So first, liaison reports. Does anybody have any liaison reports? I do have a couple of items. First off is for the order of the annual, whoops, sorry, did someone say something? No, all right. So for the order of the articles that we're going to discuss at the public hearing. So normally we discuss all of the items in order. However, we got a request from the sponsors of the climate change emergency initiative that I guess being high school students and with lots of work for school that they have to do, they have requested that their article be discussed early in the hearing rather than last in the hearing. I believe that they made the same request to Dover Warrant, and that request was granted. And so I am inclined to also grant that request. So essentially, instead of covering Article 32 as the last, we would probably cover it as the first warrant article in the hearing. So I want to know what everybody on advisory thinks about that. Or I suppose rather, if you have an objection to that. All right,
No.
hearing no objections, then I will let them know that we will be discussing their article first rather than last at the public hearing. And I will note that in the official agenda when I post it for the public hearing as well. One other thing that I wanted to sort of bring up, because there is not a resolution yet. So we currently still don't have anybody to take the minutes for the public hearing, which is of course problematic because it's very long and it's very involved, and it's a hard job. And I know because I did it myself the first 2 years I was on advisory. So if anybody has any ideas for people that they think might want to do the minutes for the public hearing, could you please let me or Jeannie Guthrie know? And we have budgeted $513, I believe, for that. So if anybody, well, anybody on advisory or actually anybody who's on this meeting right now, if you know anybody who would potentially want to do minutes for the public hearing for $500, that would be really excellent. It will be recorded on Zoom, so they can go back to the video for anything they missed, and Zoom also auto-generates a transcript, so they can have all of that at their disposal. So it's not like they have to get it right the first time. All right, so those were the sort of liaison items that I had. Any other liaison reports? All right, if not, I guess we will move on to the warrant article discussions. So again, I believe we're gonna push the gate and fence replacement down until Jeannie gets here. So the next several, I believe, are all Sean Colleen's items. So it's engineering for the roundabout, town buildings, stormwater, DPW equipment, roadway management, and tree removal. So Sean, you can break these up however you like.
Well, we're going to start with, we'll go in order. Well,
Okay.
I think it's in order, but we're going to start with the Maple Wash, and I'm going to hand the mic off to Chris Owen, Chair of Planning Board, to start. And Chris froze. You there, Chris?
No, I'm here. I'm just waiting for Steve to say okay. Can you hear me?
I can.
Steve, can you
Steve,
hear?
can you?
Yeah, sorry,
Steve, can
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what just happened with my audio, but I just switched. switched my
Well,
speaker.
everybody voted on it, and it went great.
All right, awesome. Let's move on.
So what you missed is I'm handing the mic off to Chris Owen, Chair of the Planning Board, to tee off the roundabout discussion.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. The planning board is requesting that an engineering study be funded for a roundabout at the intersection of Maple and Washington Street. We do not have a cost estimate yet, but will by March 26th. This intersection has been identified not only as one of the most dangerous in town, but one of the 5 most dangerous for commuters on Route 16 from Milford to Newton. There have been at least 4 traffic studies over the past 25 years that have arrived at the same conclusion that the best solution for this situation is a roundabout. We are looking for advisory support for this long overdue project. The project is supported by the DPW, the Planning Board, and Mass DOT. There will be a full presentation on the 26th as well as a town meeting. So if you have any questions, Sean's here, Gino's here, and I'm here.
And the red and the blue chief are also here.
Okay, great. I guess first, sorry if you said this and I missed it. I was momentarily distracted. Is there a cost estimate for the actual engineering study? Not for the whole project, but just the engineering study?
We don't have it yet. We should have, or we will have it by the 26th.
Okay, I see.
And-
Okay,
Also, this is not an engineering study. It's engineering service. This is the full engineering to get the project ready to go out to bid.
I see.
We've studied this as much as we've studied anything in town.
Well, yeah.
So the work is to actually engineer and have it ready for permit or permitted and ready to go.
Okay. And do you have an idea, just kind of like order of magnitude? Are we talking 5 figures, 6 figures?
I can tell you it's comfortably, it's between 100 and 200, but that's as tight as I'm getting that number tonight, but we'll have a fixed number tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm not comfortable enough to give you a hard number right now.
But no, that's actually, that's more precise than I was even expecting, so that's fine. Okay, so do we have an idea of what's going to be involved with the actual project? Because I know, just having listened in on some of the previous discussions on this, that either the scope or the requirements of it have changed over time. So what does this actually look like right now?
Well, the scope, the only reference to scope was a reference to a design that would have taken place in the early 90s. And if you picture any roundabouts or really rotaries that were designed back then or in the 80s or even earlier, they were much, much, much larger. Anything you recognize, at least in this area of the country, that's been done in the past couple decades are not very big. They slow the traffic down, which we want. They're comfortable to drive around. They're very well accessible for the sidewalks, and they will fit. So when it was a larger design, the conclusion was made back then that there would be land taking at least of one private property, possibly two, in the church. We're in the background, we're working diligently after the base survey was done to ensure that's not going to be the case. There won't be private property taking. It will fit within the right of way, except maybe on the town hall side. Or worst case would be on the church side, but there's already a fire hydrant there on the church, the corner there. So that was the only real reference to that.
Okay. And then I guess since we have the fire chief and the police chief here, do you have any kind of like brief comments that you wanted to make about this overall kind of idea of essentially changing that intersection into a roundabout?
Yeah, if I can weigh in. Obviously I haven't been here that long, but what I can tell you is that this was the first traffic issue that I heard about, in coming to town, and in seeing crashes occur. I can tell you from my short experience here, something needs to be done. And when you think of the potential options, and I know this has been debated in town for a while, if you look at stop signs or traffic lights or a roundabout and all those things that can be done, there's a lot of reasons why stop signs and traffic lights aren't going to work, and the proximity to the split at 27 and 16 really exacerbates the problem. And so to look at a roundabout, and having had experience in previous jurisdictions with the installation of roundabouts, it makes the most sense. I can tell you, we didn't have an exorbitant amount of crashes last year. We had 10, but again, this is COVID time, and unfortunately, to go back a couple of years, we had a data issue with the police department that I'm sure you're aware of, and so some of those statistics aren't quite accurate. But what's not quantified in our statistics are the near misses. And I can say, even a week ago, Sean and I were out looking at the intersection, and we're standing there when we're watching people that are nearly crashing. I had a near miss just myself yesterday. So something absolutely needs to be done. I think the studies have been done in the past and really have identified this as a dangerous intersection on Route 16. And from a public safety perspective and a policing perspective, a roundabout makes the most sense.
Thanks. Zach?
Yeah, I'd be happy to chime in quickly. Yeah, I just want to concur with what Chief Galvin said. And up until a few months ago, I actually had to truck across that intersection from Maple Street as part of my commute into town every day. And over a couple of years or a few years, I probably had a couple dozen near misses. One was really close, and I had to swerve out of the way to get out of somebody coming up from the split. Out of all the car accidents I've been to in town, and I've been to a whole bunch, I've definitely gone to that intersection the most, hands down. So I definitely think something needs to be done. I totally agree with the chief as far as why a traffic light or stop signs wouldn't work. I'd also be concerned that the traffic would back up past Station 1, Fire Station 1, which would hinder our response. It would hinder our call people coming to the station and getting the fire trucks and going to the calls as well. I'm totally in support of this. Thanks.
And this may just sort of be for my own edification because of my own ignorance, but like how can we be confident that by putting a roundabout in there, we aren't just making it so that the crashes are going to happen at the edge of a circle as opposed to at a cross section? I mean, people are still going to be flying up that hill, and they're still not going to be able to see what's there. And instead of a regular intersection, it'll be a circle, but they're still going to be going too fast.
Yeah, and I can understand that concern. And I think what you can see from the designs and things that have happened in our area, the way that the roundabouts are designed now is that through traffic, they really can't continue straight. They're forced to make at least a little jog in their travel, which causes them to slow down. And then what helps also is that most of the focus of the drivers, entering the roundabout are in one direction versus what happens now, especially when someone pulls out of Maple. They look left, they see that it's clear left, they look right. Especially during the morning commute, that tends to be a longer line of traffic to the right. And when they finally get an opening, they're either not looking back left, and then that's when the crash is occurring. So what this allows a lot of those drivers to do is to really only focus on one direction of travel as they're entering the roundabout, which minimizes that risk of a collision.
It also minimizes the speed of the impact. I mean, there's studies all over the country. We didn't bring them. We weren't really prepared to debate the analysis in that much depth, but there's studies all over the country that not only do you reduce the rate of crashes, but you reduce the speed of the impact. It's usually going to be about 10 or 15 miles an hour, which again is going to increase the safety. The speed limit coming at the intersection and leaving the intersection is going to be reduced to begin with, if it doesn't reduce all the way through town pretty soon anyway.
Thanks. And then ultimately, when the project is ready to go out to bid, do we have ideas about sort of like funding sources for the project itself, in terms of will there be state or federal funding that will help to offset the actual cost of the construction?
Well, this is part of and a big part of the Complete Streets prioritization plan. So that, we've been kind of chipping through the plan. We've been working our way up to this one. This is the one. At today's dollars, I don't anticipate that Complete Streets is going to fully fund it. But my guess is probably 2/3 of it maybe funded in the next round. Once we're ready, we have to get it. We have to get the design ready. If you remember, Complete Streets was kind of a deal we made with the state that we would continue working on this prioritization plan, but all the engineering services have to be funded through the town. So we somewhat committed that, and now we're asking for this segment of it. 2 years ago, we did the same with the North Main Street sidewalk. We funded that engineering. I think mostly with my budget funds. This one's a little bit bigger, obviously.
Yeah.
And Steve, this will all be explained with the full presentation as well.
Okay, great. Does anybody from advisory have any questions or comments? Dan, go ahead.
Hey, Sean, thanks for going through this. I'm just trying to, I think I've seen enough old fashioned roundabouts that as you said at the beginning, I think roundabout, I think, one of these giant, huge things. It sounds like the way to think about this is relative to the current line of traffic, just kind of almost, relatively modest bump outs to just sort of bring people out and around and so on is kind of the way to think about the size and how the size would change.
Yeah, picture a big planter in the middle of that intersection.
Okay,
It's too tight right now because the two islands neck it down too much. So it's not a direct comparison.
yeah,
If you drive around the backside of the Natick Mall off of Speen,
yep,
there's one there that's a similar size. There's one that's bigger too.
okay,
Anyone that drives the other way and goes through Norfolk, those aren't the same. Those two aren't the same size, but one of them is similar in size to what we'll be doing.
okay, that's super helpful. I could imagine at the public hearing, that could be really useful information because there'll be people who are going to be thinking roundabout, this is going to be gigantic, and maybe that can just be shut down with just the kind of description you gave.
Right, and we will have, for the public hearing, we will have, I want to say schematics, but at least overview drawings of it. There was one in the complete streets plan, but that was just kind of a raw PDF with, something crudely drawn on it. We will have something better than that for the presentation
Okay,
on the
good.
26th.
Thanks, very helpful.
Great, thank you. And also, one thing I sort of forgot to mention at the top of the agenda is one of the things that we need to do is make a recommendation for all the capital items, whether the funding is going to come from free cash or if it's going to be borrowing, just due to the timing of when ballot questions need to be finalized. Essentially, we have to make that determination before town meeting. And we had this issue last year as well. And I think we'll have a broader discussion about the capital stuff in general a bit later on the agenda. But for each of the items that we're discussing right now, I would also like advisory to have a discussion about free cash versus borrowing. Heidi has provided her sort of recommendations already, and for this item, the recommendation is that it will be borrowing. Again, we don't have an actual number, but it is probably going to be, as Sean said, between $100,000 and $200,000. So I guess, does anybody from advisory have any thoughts or any specific reason why this should not be borrowing and should be free cash?
Steve, I do recall the conversation we had with Heidi, who did extensive research based upon her annual report. And a takeaway that I recall was that we wanted to digest the audit findings from the town for the previous year to see if there are any tripwires or concerns from the auditors over uses and types of financing. And Deb, you may have done that already.
Yeah, I did. Well, the audit is complete and there was no mention whatsoever of any problems that we've had with funding, whatever. I know the number that I don't have the audit here in front of me. He's actually going to be getting it to us by the end of the week, but it is finalized. And there was a number that Heidi had shared with me that you like to zero in on, and it's still a negative number, but his explanation was it was more about funding stabilization, which as a community, we're doing great. So the number he didn't have any concerns with using free cash or borrowing or anything like that.
Great, thank you. And so then the preference would be, from my perspective, is to borrow, because municipal finance, municipal debt is the most efficient way to finance long-term assets.
All right, so Peter, are we okay then with making this a borrowing item, or do you want to table it? Peter?
Oh, I'm sorry, what was that?
Sorry, so are we okay with making this a borrowing item, or is there more discussion that we wanted to have?
And we're not going to table that, but make decisions as we go. And maybe I missed that part at the beginning.
Yeah, well, because basically by the end of today, we need to make a determination on each capital item as to whether our recommendation is going to be free cash or borrowing. So basically, I just want to make sure that we're all okay with this item being borrowing.
Yeah, I would say borrow everything until we have too much free cash, and then we'll change our mind.
Okay, sounds good. All right, let's go on to the next item. What I have here is town buildings and facilities, but Sean, if you've got something different in your order, you can.
That's
do
the right
whatever.
order, right? Can I share?
Okay. Yeah.
Just so I can walk through these slides. Did I show the right screen?
Yes.
What are you seeing?
Town of Sherborn DPW capital requests.
Nice. So there's my list of requests. If we go to facilities, there's not a whole lot to say here. We're kind of midstream with a couple of projects. There's a fair amount of cash sitting there. Several of the projects we had slated, we tapped the brakes on a little bit. If it's not obvious that last year wasn't the best year to be doing some of the work. For instance, the gutters on the police station was one I've been trying to do for a couple of years. We had it ready for bid, and I was told by a couple of people in the business, don't even try it. It's not gonna, you won't get good bids. You won't be able to get it done. So we're a little bit behind on projects, but the money's somewhat committed. I'll have a better estimate of that to capital budget. I think I'm going to see them next week. So we'll have a good summary of what's committed already. But this is the number that was plugged in from the on-site insight. This is the number that was 1 year out on last year's ask. So we just carried that forward. You want me to just keep going through them or stop at each one?
Let's stop at each one. I think it might be, yeah, because you've got so many that I'm going to forget what the first one was once you're done with the last. So has this gone before a capital budget in terms of presumably that 190 breaks down in the on-site insight report to like specific items and or projects? I remember last year, 2 years ago, maybe, on capital budget, we had kind of gone through each of the things that was in the on-site insight report, and I think some of the things you had decided weren't necessary, and and certain ones were like, yes, that we do need to do that. So have you gone through that process with capital budget?
Well, no, not completely, and I'm not going to spend a bunch of people's time doing that. That would be like predicting what the fuel's going to be tomorrow. So what I know is the numbers that were in there are bogus at this point. We're grossly underfunded on anything we thought we had funded 3 years ago. Materials are through the roof, labor's through the roof, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So I'm going to go through what's already committed in projects and what's slated that needs to be done, and kind of hold it at that. That's why it's 190 and not, I'm not trying to push it to 300 or 400, because we're really not sure where things are going to shake out this current year for getting anything done. But it's safe to say we need to fund some of the projects that were slated already. For instance, the roof's leaking at the town hall, so we're not just going to sit on it because it's going to be difficult to do. We need to do it.
Okay. Anyone from advisory have any questions or comments?
Sure, I'm fully understanding, Sean. Is the 190 for projects that have already been enumerated for the taxpayers, and they're just going to cost more, so we need an additional 190 to do them, or are there new projects involved in the 190?
Well, maybe I stated that wrong. Well, they're new. Yeah, they're new to the taxpayers, Jane. They're not new to the plan. So in essence, yeah, we're walking into the next year of the plan. And exactly, if we were to look back a year or the year that we're currently in, yeah, some of the numbers, some of the estimates are probably, grossly off. So it's to cover a little bit of both, but it's not just to cover projects that were already slated for this year, if that makes any sense. It's not like in other words, we haven't used all the money and now we need the 190 to just finish what I said we were going to do in fiscal 22. There's a pretty good chunk of change still there. But to finish out what we said we were going to do in let's say calendar 22 and into fiscal 23, we need that to finish those projects and continue on and try and keep up with the project.
On the continuing on, you mentioned the town hall roof. What are a couple of the other things that are kind of near the top of the list?
Well, we're finishing up some of the stuff on the town campus.
Yeah.
Again, the gutters on the police station.
Yep.
And that's a good example of something that was that was already baked into a year ago.
Yeah.
And again, it's designed and ready for bid. So the money's committed. Exactly what the money is, I don't know. It's a public bid.
Yeah, of course.
But I know late last fall was not a good time to do it. So it would have been, I was getting estimates, off the cuff estimates from friends that it was going to be double and still may not get done. So the kitchen at the fire station, if anyone tried to do a kitchen in the past year, they would understand why I didn't even entertain that the past few months. That needs to be done.
So Sean, as you know, typically we have an itemization so that the taxpayers know what they're approving. So will that list be available? And I also have the write-up in this one, so I'm particularly interested in it. So, will that list be available, hopefully by the time of the public meeting?
Yeah, that's the plan. Like I said, I'm going to go through that again, I think, next week. I'm not sure which date I'm going to meet with capital budget, but I'm going to go through that, finalize that with capital budget, so you'll have that. And I can send that regardless of whether I have another meeting with you or not, but I'll make sure you have it.
Okay, and I think I misspoke because I think I only have capital in the schools actually, so I'm wrong about that. But I am still interested in having the itemization for the taxpayers.
Right. I think I'm writing it up, so I'm thinking exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I sent it to Jane. You'll have to get it from her.
Sounds
You
good.
mentioned that we had some pent-up demand because of, I assume, COVID on previous projects where the capital was floated, where the bonds were approved, capital was improved. Do you have a running project fund? I know the funds are sitting out in a fund in the general ledger, and there's lists from prior town meetings. Have any of those changed or altered because of just the environment we're in now? Like you may have pushed aside one and dedicated more to another? Or are you still on track with all of those projects that were voted on and those funds are still sitting in the bank?
Well, those estimates are just estimates. that estimate means, we go out to public bid, so the number becomes the number. If
I
that's
see.
answering any of your questions. So
Yeah,
there's
so
some
those
things that
bids-
were slated that may have shown up. And I don't have it in front of me. I didn't want to try to get too into the weeds of this, but let's just say we were going to do the gutters at the police station. It was going to be $30,000. If I put that out to bid and it came back at 45 and we decided to do it, it is what it is. It's 45, but that's why we carry a contingency, and the single number at town meeting isn't meant to lock any one of those projects in, because none of those projects are designed. Those are just coming off an estimate, as you know, from On-Site Insight. And now this year, that estimate was 3 years ago, pre-COVID. So it's anyone's guess how good that number is. It's a trend though, and we know we can continue to follow the trend, but the COVID factor that we should put on the end of that number, I don't know what it is. I'd love your take on it. But it's going to change.
Thank you.
All right, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Heidi, but this one you're also recommending be borrowing. Obviously, most of the capital town building stuff are equipment with a lifespan, so it makes sense.
Yes. Yes,
right,
I'd recommend borrowing.
Advisory, any objection to borrowing for the town buildings capital?
No objection, but that part of the reason for the itemization is just, I think, Heidi, you need to make sure it is all borrowable. Everything is borrowable, right?
Yes, it's a question of, you can't replace certain cabinets, but I'll be talking with Sean and we'll work on the list.
Great, thank you. All right, Sean, you want to move on to your next one?
Yeah. So this was a change in number. Someone's got an echo. From what I originally put into capital budget, and I'll explain why. Again, there's nothing new in this plan. We're following the examples of the roadway management plan that we did. Obviously, these costs were estimated 2.5 years ago now, not only pre-COVID, that didn't really affect road numbers that much a year and a half ago, because oil was at the bottom, but we're not going to get asphalt for what we got it for last summer, this summer. So I took some of that into account. The two major projects, which I have not presented, but the two major projects we're shooting for to combine the Chapter 90 funds and this 500 are a chip seal of most of North Main Street from Natick to the lights, and a complete rebuild of Woodland Street and Goulding West, from the intersection of Goulding West and Woodland, not the entire length of Woodland. So that's two pretty big projects, and then that leaves money in there for things like what's behind me in the picture, which was the road collapse we had this year, which got covered by the roadway management, basically contingency that we had, and obviously other smaller projects for pavement preservation. So we're requesting, as you can see on there, 500. And again, that's on top of our normal 260 allotment for the Chapter 90 funds.
And
if I could,
Sean,
I would, if there's any chance that some of that could be free cash, as everyone remembers, that changes the game a little bit for me of when we can spend it, which makes a difference. July 1st isn't really the best time to call a contractor and say, oh, now I can go, because everyone just got in line ahead of us. So at least one of those projects will get pushed ultimately if we borrow all of that money. I don't know if there's any appetite to split it. We have split in years past. We certainly did it with facilities a handful of years ago where we did some free cash and some borrowing. Just something to consider.
Yeah. I guess before we address that, first is and I apologize if you said this number and I missed it, but you said so the 500,000, that's an increase from the previous projection. What was the previous projection for this year? I just want to know how much of an increase this is.
Dan, do you remember? I don't want to crash my screen. I think I brought 360 originally to capital.
The original draft of the warrant said 350.
350, right? And what that was a carryover from the second year out on last year's ask, because it was too early in the year for me to see these prices and get quotes out of the guys.
Okay.
So does that mean it's gone up 150 just since, December or whenever the warrant was drafted?
No, the prices didn't. But I actually, rather than just using kind of the trend number that they threw in, the engineers, if you remember looking through the pavement assessment, I'm sure Peter does, they basically just threw a trend at it and said, if we're not at least throwing this amount of money over the course of, these 5 years, you're going to fall behind. But that's, and so that, that's basically what the 350 was. It certainly does go up because of the escalation that we've seen in the past 6 to 8 months. But more importantly, what I did is I threw a couple specific projects at it. So you could look at it like, all right, you threw a couple heavy projects this year, maybe not for next year. And then, the price still shakes out how it shakes out and adjusts the trend. But this was to cover a couple of real projects that we're going to try and target.
So then if we were to split this free cash and borrowing, what amount of free cash would get you to a place where you could be doing the project that you wanted up to July 1st?
I think if you split it in half, yeah, if you split it in half, it would make a pretty significant difference. Because the larger of the two contracts I could sign based on the Chapter 90 and that half. And then the other one, the chip sealing, we do in the middle of summer anyway. So the timing would work out.
Heidi, how does that look to you? I'm sorry that I don't have this on screen to share with everyone else, but you had this breakdown, and based on your free cash recommendations, we left ourselves with a $235,000 remainder, assuming a 5% rollover on free cash. So obviously splitting this 500,000 would be more than the remainder that you had calculated. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
I would be more comfortable going around 200. I think if we can go and see what the snow and ice comes in and some of the other bills, right now we have placeholders, so there might be room to eke some more money from that. If what that comes in, I have 100,000 for police overtime. If we're not there, same with snow and ice, there might be some more money to pick up. I probably would not want to use up the whole remainder right now. Initial thought would be 200,000.
200. I guess two questions. First, addressed at Heidi, but do we know when are we gonna have final numbers on snow and ice, other bills, and overtime, and how does that jibe with? Because I know there was a timing issue with having to put up the ballot questions, right? So we need an exact number for the ballot questions, right?
No, actually there are no numbers on the ballot questions.
Oh.
So
okay.
We're okay with just making your motion on the split, whatever we decide. But the ballot question is just to approve the project.
I see. I see. So
Like
there's no,
the
okay.
Like a borrowing, yeah, we don't have any
Okay.
numbers listed.
So simply the fact that we are splitting it is fine, and then it'll just be a ballot question will be for road improvement, and it won't actually say an amount.
Excluded, right, excluded debt borrowing.
Okay. Okay,
And
great.
the ballot could only kill the borrowing. It couldn't kill the free cash. Town meeting would have already approved the free cash.
Right. Yeah, no, I was just wondering because we need to know the ballot questions essentially before even the public hearing. So that's why I was like, wow, this is a bit early to be trying to tie this all down. But if we don't actually need to tie down the numbers, then that's good.
So put it on the ballot. I mean, you're gonna anyway
Yeah.
if it's that big of a number.
Right, right. Okay. All right, that sounds good. Advisory, any questions, comments about the funding for the roadway management?
Heidi and Deb, can you just remind me, there's a window that free cash has to be spent in, right? What is
By
that?
June the 30th.
So Sean, would you be confident that you could spend that money by then?
Wait, no. That's when it needs to be trained. I can't spend.
Well, it has to be
If you
appropriate.
use this free cash to cover next year's annual town meeting,
It
it
needs
just
to be,
it gets rolled over.
it needs to be appropriated by June the 30th.
Okay, right. And so town meeting counts as appropriating, it, right?
Correct.
Okay, right.
So, okay.
All right, any other questions or comments about roadway management from advisory?
Sean, just to double check, so I did look back at the earlier capital budget spreadsheets, and as I looked up, the early number is 350. And the jump from the 350 to 500 is really, it's the rising materials costs.
Rising material cost and two pretty large projects we want to try and hit.
And so it's both the rising materials cost and kind of a firming up of plans and getting more specific about, hey, we really want to do these two projects. They're big projects. This is what it's going to cost us, these two big projects. Whereas the 350 was more trend line, and we'll sort of see where we go. And now it's gotten a bit more specific.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
John, remind me, the 5-year plan, did that include taking pictures of every inch of the roadway within Sherborn?
Well, that's what developed the 5-year plan. And we had done that 2 consecutive years. I'm not going to do that every year. I'll probably do it this coming year. I want to try to get off doing it in fall. It's pretty tough to do it in fall because if you miss the early timing because of, the rains come in, you end up with leaves all over the road and it doesn't scan all that well. And you're not necessarily catching the trend when you do it every year. And it's not cheap. But that is what developed that plan.
And how much above the 500,000 are the Chapter 90 funds? So what's the total budget? Because I'm assuming it's the debt or combination debt, free cash, that makes up the 500,000. Then the Chapter 90 funds, which are on top of that, or included in the 500,000.
No, they don't have any. No, they're on top of that. Chapter 90 brings in 260 a year.
Oh, that's the number.
So at 260 a year, you remember we had trends where we were falling off the cliff. If we didn't fund it, a zero funding would bring 260 a year. But that really doesn't do anything. So we had different models showing what happens if you throw 100 a year, 200 a year, 300 a year at it. So 500 this year is higher than we estimated. But again, we didn't think we'd see oil at the prices we had, at least up till yesterday, a year and a half ago. And again, it doesn't need to stay at that level long term. It was just, this was the year to hit a couple of projects. But again, the whole point of it is if you fall behind, you have roads that are peeling up beyond repair, and they're incredibly expensive to fix. And if anyone's driven through Sherborn the past few weeks, we're falling behind, probably faster than the models were predicting it.
And Sean, on that, the two projects are ones where if they were postponed for a year, we really would be in that situation of falling behind.
North Main Street is a huge risk.
Okay.
And it's, you know, that's not one we can just ignore. Unless you drive through Millis, they tend to ignore roads like that. But there's a lot of traffic down North Main Street, and we're going to be liable for an awful lot of tires and rims if we let it fall apart, and it will be incredibly expensive to fix. And unfortunately, it's one of the newest stretches of road. From Dowses to the Natick line is one of the newest stretches on a main road, and we're already having to fix it. So we're going for a cheaper alternative than grind it and repave it again.
And what about the Goulding West and Woodland? Also at the stage we'd be falling behind and putting ourselves at risk?
Those are so far behind that it's unbearable to drive on them, and we'll condemn them pretty soon. We literally patch potholes on those roads every day right now, every single day. And those are two of the most dangerous roads in town to fix potholes. And I see John Hargrave on here, and on any given day, he lives on a better road than Woodland Street right now. So that's why those two made it. And it's significant. It's much more money to work on those two roads, but we can't have people living on roads like that, especially on a highly traveled road.
Thanks.
And for those significant projects, they're not just the covering over. Do you have to dig them down to a certain level and rebuild the road bed up, or is
Yes,
it a
yeah,
combination?
that's what, Woodland Street, the section of Woodland we're doing in Goulding West, that's exactly what we're doing. They call it reclaim, where they basically grind the road and stuff it back into the dirt and start over. That's the only thing we can do there. Those roads of age and a bad coat of asphalt on top have destroyed them. And no one, even if we asked them, would pave over them. And there's no one on this committee that would want that, because they would be at high risk of failing very quickly.
Now, in that redesign of those roads, are there way to channel what? We don't have curbings and sewers. The one
We do.
Oh, we do. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of stormwater on both of those roads. There's quite a handful of catch basins, not a lot. And then there's berms that carry the water. Not every inch of Sherborn just sheds off on the people's yards like people think. There's an awful lot of places where it doesn't. There's a couple of culverts on each of those roads. There's a stormwater easement on Woodland Street. Most of that's functioning. Some of that's going to be repaired and modified.
Okay, and that would help improve the longevity of the road with that water runoff and minimize the deterioration at the edges.
Right.
All right, any other advisory discussion on the roadways? All right, if not, Sean, you want to move on to your next?
Again, nothing new on stormwater. The last article was 2 town meetings ago. We continue to work on our MS4 compliance each year. We have an increasing level of work we have to do. This is mandated by the EPA. We're in the beginning phases. A couple people, I think, came to some of our outreach presentations on phosphorus reduction. Everyone in this committee is going to start having to pay attention to that. There's a significant price tag in the upcoming years, within the next 5 to 10 years, that we're going to have to spend on phosphorus reduction, thanks to being in the Charles River watershed. So there's ongoing work there, just with the consultants and with the level of work that we have to start doing. And then, of course, this also covers physical work with stormwater repairs or improvements, not including projects like we just talked. We probably wouldn't be using any of these funds for fixing the drainage while we're ripping a road up. But in other areas, we may be. And there's just certain projects we will do, which we've done over the years, and each individual project was paid for, usually on its own. Some stormwater improvements at Farm Pond over the years have been done like that with their own article. That's about it. I don't expect that the 200 is going to be spent this fiscal year. We haven't used up the money from last fiscal year, but during this year we would. So we have to re-up it. And I don't really have an estimate of how much we'll be spending on one of the issues we have right now with the Silverwood Farm, Doppinbrook area. But there will be money spent out of the current funding we have.
And I believe this one is also being recommended for borrowing. Anyone from advisory have any questions or comments about stormwater compliance? This one's pretty straightforward since it comes up every year. All right, you want to move on, Sean?
Yeah. This is a pretty small number for equipment, but nonetheless, it's important. I actually had this on and pulled it last year, and I think the year before. Last year was really not a good year to be buying equipment. We'd probably be getting it delivered now if we had. So we have a roller that is, I don't even know, it's probably 10 years older than I am. It's ancient, it's dangerous, it hardly runs. So we're gonna replace that. Vibra plate compactor, which is it's a heavy compactor. It's not like one you use to build a patio. But it's for doing trenches for drainage or other heavy compaction. And the roller has a trailer that it lives on. So we're going to replace that as well. This I'll be going over with, I was going to go over with capital budget last night, but I wasn't able to get to that meeting. So we have quotes on all that equipment.
Now, is there any residual value in the equipment? Like, can you sell that to Millis so that they may try to fix their roads?
I'm glad you asked. I don't think Millis would use it, but we obviously we don't even have a Vibra plate compactor, but the roller and the trailer we have will be auctioned. So obviously that'll end up in the sale of equipment revolving fund.
And do you have any money in there?
There's plenty of money in there.
Would any of that fund these requests?
No, I'm requesting this, and that didn't work out so well last time. I couldn't venture to guess. It'd be probably maybe I don't even think I'd get $1,000 for what we have.
No, the fund balance for your revolving equipment fund for DPW. Is there significant funds in there?
No, I'm sorry. There's
No.
significant funds in there, but they're getting committed. Those are funds that the fire department and the police department put in there. I don't have much in there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think you just have a couple $1,000s, don't you, Sean?
Yeah, I misunderstood the question. There's a lot in there, and that was a discussion for the other night. I'm hoping that's mostly getting committed to a fire department purchase.
It is.
Well, it's my understanding that departments are segregated, are they not, Deb?
Yes, they are. Like within the fund, we can see
Yeah.
how much is fire, police, and DPW. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, it benefits everyone to get the market price for these used equipment.
And have these been presented to, what do you call it, capital budget?
No. Again, I'll go over that with them next week.
Yeah,
Um,
Didn't happen last night because just conflicting schedules and all.
And I believe these, Heidi, you are recommending free cash for, right?
Yes.
And does anyone from advisory have any objection to using free cash to purchase these?
What, and thank you, Heidi, but what's the criteria? One bucket or another bucket that we're using?
What I have used, and Steve will probably bring this up later when we get to the discussion on funding sources, I put together an amount, a chart, and to look at what amount of free cash we should roll over, what amount of free cash is left. And then I've looked at what smaller projects we could just pay off. If it's something that is a long useful life, the cost of putting this in a borrowing and the interest costs we're paying with the issuance on some of these, it's not worth paying interest for $36,000 for several years if we have the free cash. So, you try to weigh what the cost is going to be versus the benefit, and we have already about $2 million to borrow. So I'm trying to cut down the borrowing costs because I've been asked by advisory, can I cut down the debt service number? So I'm trying to look at for articles that I could pull out. Because when you do a bond, they seem to be weighted higher interest in the beginning of the bonds, and these pieces would get put in the beginning of the bonds because they get paid off first. So there's a higher interest on some of these smaller items.
Right.
Some of these are too cheap to really even be talking about. I mean, they hardly rise to the capital level. In most towns, I wouldn't even be bringing these to capital.
No, they meet the capital. They meet the capital requirements.
Well, but our capital requirement is 10,000, and that's not even really recognized in most places as capital.
Well, then they're not Sherborn. So
well, I know we are special.
What they do,
but I don't think you can bond it.
The idea of long life equipment, and you said the previous one is older than you, Steve, so that's at least 21 years old. You, by incurring debt, you spread the costs over the future taxpayers for the future benefit of a long-lived asset. And so that we can't lose sight of just because we have a big pot over here and a smaller pot over here. We're trying to get one number down. It's really from a taxpayer's equity perspective of how you finance things. So that's another criteria to look, a lens to look to this.
It is. I'm very concerned about the amount of debt we're incurring because we're only burning off about $80,000 to $100,000 retiring debt per year right now, and we are adding $2 million plus each year in debt. And when I look at the capital budget, there's over $2 million coming in the next 5 years to be added on. So when we have a good free cash year, I'm trying to not put everything into debt because our numbers are going way up. So that's a decision for you to make. And my recommendation is to try and pull some of the items and not have all the debt as a burden on the taxpayer in a different way. But that is ultimately going to be up to you and the select board to decide which projects go.
Okay. I'm okay with free cash for this. Any other perspectives from advisory before we move on?
Steve, do you see that Eric has his hand up?
Oh, yes. No, I didn't see that, but thank you. Eric, please go ahead.
I just want to, something that Heidi said just kind of resonated with me. Does someone set a certain goal of what the borrowing should be each year and then assign capital projects to fit within that? Do you know what I'm trying to say? So you have a target debt service you want to pay on your operating budget. We plan out capital projects 5 years. Is there some entity or someone that actually says, okay, this year we should borrow $1 million, this year we'll borrow 200,000, and so on and so forth? Is that ever set this year, or is it more kind of reactionary? And this is just, I apologize if I should, be educated in this, but I'm trying to figure out, because that's how it is in other communities I work.
Someone else might have a better answer, but my answer would be we seem to be more reactionary. And that's just based on, I was on capital budget before I was chair of advisory, and then I've been chair now for 3 years. And I'm pretty sure that it's something that capital budget probably ought to be looking at, and that I think Heidi probably wishes capital budget and advisory were looking at. But at the end of the day, it becomes one of those things where we're just trying to keep our heads above water and get ourselves through this whole town meeting process. And then that's the type of thing that, intelligent long-term planning is the type of thing that seems to probably get pushed onto a back burner. And I know Heidi's been trying to get us to move that onto the front burner, but I've not been very good about that. But so unless somebody from capital budget can say that, oh no, we've definitely been looking at that and we've been actually trying to strategize that. I don't believe that there is any. We have been trying to have a 5-year capital plan from all of the major departments that have capital purchases. And I think that's a good first step. And I think Heidi is trying to kind of look at and plan out, the years that are going to hit. And I think she tries to warn advisory and capital when it's like things are about to get bad. But I don't know that there is a target in mind. But I don't know if Heidi
Steve,
or
you don't give advisory enough credit. We look at the debt issuances every year and the retirement of debt and the debt service each year. Because those are fixed things over the life of the bonds that are floated. And they're usually the ski slopes. They peak and then they go down. What's been happening more recently, we did have a period earlier in my advisory career where the ski slope steepened and we would be retiring more debt, and that would increase the debt capacity as a percent of the overall budget. And that's usually the target, percent of the overall budget, the debt service, which is the interest and principal payment for each year. And then as they retire, you replace them to replace those capital items. And so that is looked at, maybe not within the entire advisory committee, but there are 4 or 5 existing, maybe 6 bond issuances, and those have a life cycle and they have a payment schedule, and those are all scheduled out for the next 20 or so years. And by replacing the capital with retired debt, you try to maintain a debt service as a percent of the budget that is reasonable, consistent trend. And that has been looked at. Unfortunately, and what Heidi has been telling us is that there's a lot more borrowing to come due to some large projects in town that are nearing the end and requiring more borrowing. But Eric, to answer your question, it is looked at annually, and Heidi looks at it as a career.
Okay, and that's basically 2 things, if I may, through the chair, 2 things to add is basically that's good, that's being looked at, because if you do see a hump coming up, we think an increase of debts, you can, although it's some people it's controversial, you can actually bank free cash to some extent to get ready to kind of offset that and kind of keep a flat budget, and therefore you kind of keep that same amount either reserved going to debt service or cash reserved essentially to flatten out, so each year you have a predictable available money in the operating budget. The second thing to what I recommend looking at is things like Sean presented on the paving. If you know you're going to exceed Chapter 90 every year, which you are, Chapter 90 has not increased for, I don't know, over 10 years. There's been one time, I think it was Baker's second term, he actually added, I think, 50% to it. And another year they added a little bit to it. But other than that, Chapter 90 has been, I think it's 500 million statewide, and has not kept up with the asphalt inflation index. So you know you're going to do that. You might want to consider just saying 100 or 200,000, no matter what comes out of operating funds for things like that, versus borrowing every single year for a known annual cost, such as like paving. And I don't know if there's anyone else I can follow up with, maybe with capital budget or something, just to further kind of promote this philosophy. That's all.
They do have open
Thanks.
meetings.
I've got Heidi first and then Dan.
Thanks. I said one other point that concerns me when we put all these items as borrowed, they require a town meeting vote if you're putting it as exempt debt. So if you have a whole list of a la carte items that you're giving to the voters, and I know the number of ballot questions, I think we're already potentially up to 7 to 9 right now. And if you add these items in, there's a chance that it could be voted down at town meeting. So if it's an item that is needed by the department, $36,000 odd, I think it's better use of free cash to get something that is needed rather than take a chance that it would also fail at the ballot.
Thanks. Dan?
I'm also good with using free cash for the particular item we were talking about, but to come back to the bigger topic, I think Eric's comments and Peter's comments and so on, and where we are with longer term planning. This is my first year on capital budget, so I'm still climbing the learning curve and learning, but I think there would be scope for more long-term planning. Heidi's been a big advocate of that, and seems like there would be scope for doing some more comprehensive kind of look ahead of where we're going, what we might be anticipating, so that it would be possible to have more of an idea of kind of what might we expect next year and the year after to be the appropriate or planned for amount of borrowing that isn't going to blow out the budget. So I just wanted to kind of lend my support to the thought of trying to perhaps do a bit more of that as well.
Great. Okay, Jane.
Yeah, I agree with the need for the long-term planning. I also, and Heidi, I don't know if you want to speak to this, but another issue with the significantly increased borrowing is that since we typically do this on an exempt debt basis, we're basically raising the Proposition 2.5 ceiling. We're essentially doing an override without having the voters vote on an override, because we're raising the Proposition 2.5 ceiling higher and higher every time we do exempt debt. So, and I don't know if you want to speak to that, Heidi. I know it's something you've had your eye on.
No, I think actually, well, it actually falls with the finance director to go through forecasting and future planning and probably input from Wendy. But yes, it's something I've noted. This is a trend. I'm trying to bring it up because I would like to have some people look and start focusing on what happens if we start running out of this capacity too. But yes, we do seem to use exempt debt kind of to act as an override.
And it's a temporary override, just not to scare the general public. Whenever the exempt debt, it's till the debt's exhausted, not like the true override, which is overridden forever.
Correct. But our projects that we're borrowing, especially the library, it's a 20-year borrowing. We've done some big police, the fire department, the engines, those were also a 20-year borrowing. They are carrying out this number longer than other items have in the past.
All right, thanks. Any other, we kind of went off on a tangent. It wasn't exactly a tangent because we need to have this discussion. I just was planning on it later in the meeting, but any other advisory discussion about the DPW equipment or the concept of free cash versus borrowing, but mostly as it applies to what we're talking about right now with Sean? All right, if not, Sean, you want to move on to your next item? Looks like it's trees.
This will be a shorter conversation of where to get the money from. It's been a couple of years since we asked for money for the trees. We just put a second list out for a handful of trees. It's like 28 trees were on the list. That went out for public bid. They should be starting that, I think, next week. We still have a lot of trees that, mostly oaks, that died off. Some of them are still standing, but they died 4 years ago. So we're estimating this might be the last big chunk. It may not be. but we got to keep going after it. Eversource hasn't exhausted what they did, but they've fallen off a little bit the past couple of years. They made a huge push 2, 3, 4 years ago. We did the best we could, and I think we did a good job of assessing what trees they would never go after, which is why some of them are still standing after 3 or 4 years. They obviously do a risk assessment, not for the street, not for the public, but for their asset. So we're stuck with covering the rest, which is the trees that'll fall on people or cars. This request we put in, and then this was brought up in the ARPA discussion. Everyone should know we also threw this on the earmark list that's going to go to the state. That'd be great if we got the earmark, but we won't know that for quite a while. I think if there's any money spent in town on from the ARPA fund, I don't understand why we wouldn't spend this. We can't, to the best of my knowledge, we cannot borrow money to remove things. So we can't really even have that discussion. It's either free cash or ARPA, I think. And we could, if somehow we found out we got the earmark 6 or 8 months from now, we could just, obviously we wouldn't spend this money if there was enough there.
That's how, where is it in the ARPA line for funding? Isn't there a process now? You take a number and
yeah, I think you guys are going to vote on it someday, but yeah.
ARPA is going to be a discussion at the March 25th select board meeting. And I think that it is one of the highest priorities. I think it's right up there at the top.
I would agree. And as the trees have always come up, it's a public safety issue.
And Sean, I believe there is, I just don't remember anymore, but is there an amount that you put into your operating budget every year also for trees?
Yes. What we try to do is use that primarily for the emergencies. If you picture this is going to go out, there's going to be a list. We're going to put it out to bid. The budget pretty much covers most of the other emergency stuff that comes down in storms or, almost weekly, if not a couple times a month, we have trees that are endangering the road that just came out of nowhere that we typically don't use this for. We use the budget funds.
And the multiple is 3 times the cost of planned tree removal for emergency removal, I think you mentioned. Like if you had to call someone to remove a tree across Main Street tomorrow versus planning to remove that
correct
tree on the street, there's multiple cost factors.
Yeah.
My only one other sort of question or comment about the trees item is that I don't know the answer to this, but I'm just not sure. Is this even allowable as a capital item? Because since removing a tree is not an asset, right? So
that's correct.
I've already mentioned this to Eric and Jeff, but I think at tomorrow night's meeting, hopefully, I think they will pull this out of the capital improvement plan and just make it its own article. I mean, there's no reason why it can't just exist as its own article, right?
That's correct.
Well, actually, it was last time because it was stabilization funds.
Right.
So
I
the article to use the stabilization funds, which it needed as its own.
Yeah.
Well, and if they just decide to do ARPA, then we don't even need to talk about it anymore as far as town meeting.
Yeah. But well, I guess, I don't know. We'll see what they decide at the March 24th meeting, but I don't imagine that it's going to get pulled and funded with ARPA before the public hearing, right?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, anyways, we'll find out if it is.
We're checking boxes off that it's not going to be. It's not going to be on the ballot. We know that.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to go to town meeting, but I mean, I wasn't about to drop it off my list and have everyone forget about it. But
yeah. Well, the fewer things that we have at the public hearing and the town meeting, the better, I'd say.
Agreed.
All right, move on. What do
That's
you have
the end
next?
of mine.
Oh, is that the end of yours? All right,
Oh,
hang
it's a
on,
black screen.
I've got so many, all right. Roundabout, town building, stormwater, DPW, roadway management, tree removal. Okay, great. And then, oh, I see Jeannie Guthrie is on here now. Jeannie, we put off the gate and fence replacement until you're here. So if you want to
Thank you.
do that one now.
I put in for a capital item for roughly $25,000. The gates at Farm Pond and the fencing are beyond their limits. They're difficult to open, they're difficult to close. We have a pretty good plan in place to eliminate one gate and pull it down the boat ramp more, pull up some of the pavement to make it so it doesn't go flying down into the pond, the stormwater. The gates will be like similar to what's at the transfer station now, the entrance gates where they pull close. And then the boat ramp gate will be very similar. It'll be a two-sided gate that swings open on both sides and closes, but they need to be replaced. It's hard for the police, it's hard for me, it's hard for the gate guards, it's hard for everybody.
Right. And have you presented this to capital budget?
I have,
Okay, great.
and the selectmen also.
All right, super. And I believe Heidi's also got this one marked for free cash. So I have no meaningful questions. Does anybody else from advisory have any questions about the gate and fence replacement? All right, that sounds good. Thank you,
Boy, I'm
Jeannie.
easier than Sean.
Yeah. Kit, do you want to run DPW?
Thanks a lot.
All right. All right, I believe that is all those capital items. I know it's out of order, but I wanted to kind of respect the original agenda order. So we're gonna do the other capital item funding near the end of the meeting since it was add-on. So next up, we have Article 30, which is actually, I don't know if that's the correct number anymore. The citizens petition Rockwood Street maintenance and updates. And I believe John Hargrave is here.
Steve, thanks.
Yeah, and do you have if you want to share screen, you can do that if you have a presentation.
Great, I do. This is our road. This is Rockwood Street in Sherborn, and it's being washed away. We love this road. It's an important road for Sherborn. It's where we live, but climate change and lot development have caused record water runoff, and this erosion is eating away our road. We often talk about the cost of climate change, but now we're seeing it right here in Sherborn. I'm sure everyone has noticed the increased rainfall this year due to global warming. And because our road is directly in the path of all that runoff, it degrades easily. So this is Peters Hill over here, and you can see how that water just washes away the road. This is the access road going up to the power lines there. And also you can see how it just washes away. The road requires proper drainage of standing water, widening in places to accommodate two vehicles, and an asphalt surface to minimize erosion and keep drivers and pedestrians safe. And we're excited about what this could look like when it's done. We can make it friendly for joggers, for bicyclists, for dog walkers, and it's perfect because it's a long street with a dead end. So we can make it much more bike friendly, like we recently made Whitney Street. And by the way, I love Whitney Street. I have some friends who live on Whitney Street, but I am terrified to ride my bike there. And we can make it much more dog friendly, like we made the new rail trail connector, which is awesome. Everybody should check it out. We are grateful to Director Colleen and the Sherborn Highway Department for spending so much time and money repairing the road. They're out here constantly patching this road and keeping it passable. I feel terrible that so many tax dollars are spent on our road, just keeping it patched. I think if most citizens knew how much money was being spent on Rockwood Street, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. The good news is the town will save money over the long term in maintenance costs. We have a citizens petition signed by Rockwood Street residents. We have several sources of potential funding, and we're looking forward to welcoming more bikers and hikers to Laurel Fields next door, to Peters Hill, one of the best hiking spots in Sherborn, and to Douse Orchard, one of our most important Sherborn businesses. These are all Rockwood Street connectors. So this can be a really special project for the town. We can't turn back the clock on climate change or pretend that it doesn't exist. It's time for us to pave Rockwood Street and make it a safe, beautiful road for residents and visitors. And we look forward quite literally to sharing our road with you. We ask you to vote yes on Article 30, Rockwood Street maintenance and updates.
Sean, where does this fall on the roadway management plan? Does this road even come up, or was it just an unpaved road and they're second-class roads that don't get the attention that maintained roadways need?
Correct. It wasn't part of that plan. I mean, certainly they didn't exactly scan it with the IA equipment. It is obviously the worst condition road in town, depending on which day you drive it. But no,
You told me my road.
It's not part
told
of
me
that
my
plan.
road was the worst.
It depends. I said which. I said which day. The problem is you guys want your road to be bad. John does not. There's two different. There's a big distinction between Green Lane and Rockwood. One's a cut through, one's not.
Thank you. That makes sense.
They are the two most expensive roads in town to maintain. That's hands down a fact.
Do you have a ballpark number for how much? No. Okay. So, John, to be clear, there is no actual engineering study for this. There's no cost estimate for building the road. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I guess just at the just right at the outset, I mean, I can say, and I guess I don't want to speak for advisory, but I can tell you what my perspective is and what I suspect everybody else on advisory's perspective is that without a cost associated to the project, I mean, it's almost antithetical to the purpose of the advisory committee to recommend favorable action on this. You know, we're not going to recommend favorable action on something that we don't even know what it's going to cost. But I guess I'll open the floor to other advisory members to see what you think about that.
Is there
Dan?
a precedent? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I disagree. I agree with that. I don't know how you can move forward with it if you don't have any studies or costs to associate with it. Sorry, Peter, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking the last unpaved road, maybe 100 years ago, that was paved. Was there a path that it followed? Going to DPW, asking for, we know what the multi-million dollar, not the $1 million Pine Hill School Road cost.
1.6 million.
1.6 million. Is there a mechanism to request unpaved roads to be paved? And we may have to go back in history because most of them are paved. But it would make sense that you ask DPW, where it would fit, how much it would cost, what the time frame would be. And then that would give us some meat on the bones of this proposal. Or Sean could find the money and just do it next week.
It's a lot of money. Pine Hill Lane was $1.6 million, and Rockwood, I took a quick look at it on Google Maps, and it's about 2.5 times the length of Pine Hill Lane. Dan, you've got your hand up. Thank you for waiting patiently.
Sure. So my recollection from the last select board meeting, right, is there was discussion about this, and that Sean, you are going to undertake getting going on some engineering work. I wonder if you could say just a little bit about that and the likely timing of that for when that might proceed and when it might get to a point where there would actually be an estimate of the cost.
So that was last Thursday, and I'm in discussions with 2 different engineering firms. The select board did approve me to spend up to $20,000, basically doing an assessment or the design. It's not an intensive design, but there is some permitting that needs to be done. There's wetlands. There's drainage design that'll need to be done. Questionable how much permitting needs to be done on the drainage. So that work will be done. I won't have that before the hearing. I won't have those estimates for construction before town meeting. So we won't have that number. Certainly, there's nothing that's shovel ready at the moment.
So I think that puts me in kind of the same place Steve was, that it would just be difficult to go forward now to make a recommendation for a favorable action without some of those numbers that are going to be coming a bit later.
Thanks, Natalie. You're muted,
I have
Natalie.
a question. John Hargrave, I think you were talking about this, that you could get to Peters Hill and get to Laurel Farm from this road. I don't see on Google Maps are there trails there leading to those places from that road?
Yeah, there are.
There's, and they go over public property. They're not like private trails through, on people's land.
Well, the one is up the access road, which, as far as I understand, is public road. It's on the Sherborn Trails Guide. And the other one is in Sherborn town-owned property next to the orchard.
Thanks. Otherwise, yeah, I agree. If we don't know what it's going to cost, I don't know what we can do about it.
Jane?
Yeah, I agree that it wouldn't be possible to vote for this without knowing what the cost is, but I'd also like to go one step further and say I think we should see a cost benefit. In other words, know what the costs are, but also know what our current costs are so that we can compare the two. And Sean, I know you don't have that data, right now, but perhaps as we're working toward a potential solution on this, we could try to, have some of that data so that we can make an intelligent decision about whether it really does make sense to make a large upfront investment, or whether, the cost benefit is such that we should just, keep doing the patching.
That would certainly be something I'd be presenting back with, probably at the tail end of having the engineering estimates would be the benefit analysis.
Thanks. Chris Brown?
I'm one of the Rockwood Street residents. John, we obviously missed you last November when you were coming around talking to folks about this, and I think Sean's got the keys to the car on this one in some ways, in so much as he's got access to the money to do some of the engineering to give us some guidance. I hate to say this, John, but Rockwood Street's definitely gone on its worst side of it since you've moved in, and it's not you or your wonderful family's fault at all. but we have suffered, as you said, from the developing climate change. Actually, I would say it started with the cell phone tower road, this climate change, and the removal of several hundreds, if not thousands, of trees from a new construction or replacement construction. And it's gone downhill. It's quite remarkable. This year's been, I would say, the worst year ever for the street. I don't know if some of the areas that have come out this year, down the edge of my property, for example, are related to the old usage of the Laurel Farm as a quarry. I think I'm with Stephen and saying, let's get all our numbers, let's keep our powder dry for another town meeting when we've actually got numbers to go to the town and say, come on, let's do this.
Out of curiosity, John, how many of the Rockwood residents signed your petition?
The majority.
Okay. And the Dowse Orchard is also on there. Did you approach the Dowses about this?
Well, they're not residents.
Yeah, but they're still allowed to sign a petition, right? And they own a business and they are residents in town. I could have signed it, So I was just wondering, did you approach them?
I can't speak for other folks, and I want to be sensitive to people who may prefer to just stay out of it one way or the other. So I can only speak for the people that signed the petition.
Okay.
I hope you understand.
I think 4 of the 6 houses did sign the petition. The only houses that didn't was myself, because we weren't asked, and Bob Gadoff, our next door neighbor, number 6, and he actually is frequently out of town, and so he has properties elsewhere.
Great, thanks. John, you had mentioned, and actually, Chris, you've also mentioned something about development along Rockwood being part of the reason why there's been more erosion. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. 29, when it was the redevelopment of that plot on that house started 2 to 3 years ago, the developer clear cut the land and removed what must have been several hundreds of trees from it. As a result, we started seeing runoff from that property even before the house was built and in use. The earliest evidence of that, or most obvious evidence of that, was literally coming down the driveway. It would run down away from John's house towards my house, because it's at the one of the peaks. It's at the highest point on Rockwood Street, so naturally water runs away. When you have a dirt road, the key to its survival is drainage. And Sean's done a ton of work in the last couple of years. He's dug a phenomenal trench on the uphill side. He's replaced one drainage pipe, added another one. And there's also a drainage pipe that runs from the power lines to the bottom of John's driveway at the end of the street that I suspect is blocked probably by silt and sediment. And, somehow along that 180 yards worth of pipe, there's a big blockage that we can perhaps get rid of that would help improve at least that section. But drainage is the key to success and keeping a road. And if you walk along from my house, which is the yellow house that you saw in John's pictures towards the end, you'll see areas that have been eroded on the downhill side, and that's a dangerous sign for anybody to have.
So I guess this is a question for Sean, and this, forgive me if this is just proving my ignorance, but if there is development or any other type of activity on a private property that results in increased significantly increase stormwater discharge onto a public road, especially if it is subsequently eroding or damaging that road. Does that not qualify as an illicit discharge? And is that not actually the responsibility of the property owner to stop that from happening?
To some degree. One, these houses, not too different than your street. There's with its existing house, there's already stormwater coming at the road. And this one much more so than Green Lane. There's a steep hill there. There's a lot of water. So it would be hard to quantify how much is coming now than did. There was some silt issues that were brought up. But being a single family home, it's not like they were developing, you know, as if Trask was building the fields or something else where there's a stormwater management plan. They tore a house down and built one. So it was out of my jurisdiction and unless there's a problem when it's happening, which there was some, but it was an existing driveway. There theoretically wasn't a new driveway cut. It did do some damage to the road. And, you know, we addressed that with them. So there is impacts, but you know, it's hard to quantify impacts like that. When we came off of 3 or 4 years of drought, rainfall's a funny thing. We went through years of drought. We didn't have a whole lot of issues with dirt roads other than the dust. We come out of the droughts and we have a couple hundred dead oak trees that we got to spend money on, but the roads fall apart. So you have to pick your poison a little bit. It is a lot different than it was a couple of years ago, but we had more rain in 2 months of last summer than we got the year before. So it's hard to quantify what the construction had to do with anything. It definitely needed some maintenance. 20 years of not really maintaining it very well took its toll too.
And, you know, Sean, one of the things you can do when you look at Rockwood Street, and you can see it along several areas. You know, the maintenance that used to happen prior to Sean was just taking the belly bladed truck up the street and down the street a few times. And what that did was just dig down further. And you can see that many parts of the street are 6-8+ inches below even the lower side, the downhill side of the street, which, you know, that doesn't encourage good drainage control or runoff. So, you know, whatever happens, it's a lot of work to be done on Rockwood. And you know, those trees that came down on that lot, Steve, they were straws that took up the water that in so many ways comes out now. The snow melt promotes that. And, you know, last year, I think was the first time ever we saw continuous running water off Peters Hill through August, September, etc. That I can recall. It used to stop in sort of late April, early May, when the snow melt just disappeared and the water table fell. So very different times we're living in now, and you know, we have to adjust everything. And these are things that I talked about with Daryl Beardsley and her committee as the property was going up, and we could see some of these problems beginning to develop. And I am somebody who does walk my dogs most days, at least 350 days a year, up and down the street, as long as I'm here. So I get to see it in all its glory.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments from advisory about this? Great. So again, John, I would anticipate that it's probably going to be unanimous or near unanimous recommendation of no action on this, just almost with prejudice because of the fact that there's no actual plan, there's no actual cost associated with it, and advisory is simply not going to recommend to the town that they vote in favor of a project that's got an open-ended cost to it. So ultimately, I think that what you would need to do is do some of that legwork, you know, have conversations with Sean about figuring out what the cost would be, what the essentially trying to figure out what the cost of maintaining Rockwood is right now, comparing that to what the cost of servicing the debt for this road would be over the life of the road and the ongoing maintenance, so that we've got actual data to look at, because that's kind of what we do. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so where does this leave us with the petition? So it still goes before the town for a vote, correct?
It does, unless you choose to withdraw it. A citizen's petition, the petitioner is the only person who can withdraw it, and you also cannot alter it, because it is how it was signed by all of the petitioners. So if you alter it at all, then that's no longer the document that all of your signees signed. So even if you tell me right now that you want to withdraw it, it still is going to go to the town meeting. It remains on the warrant, and at the town meeting, I would simply say, the sponsor of this has indicated they wish to withdraw. But yes, essentially the ball is entirely in your court as to what you want to do with it. But I can say that it seems like your advisory is probably going to be unanimous in recommending no action. I'm not sure actually what the select board will actually. Did select board vote on this yet? Okay. All right. Yeah. So select board was also no action on this, right?
Correct, by a vote of 3-1 with one absent.
Okay.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Steve. So if it were to pass, where does that leave the town? I mean, obviously we all want to find a win solution here that gets the road fixed. Where does that leave the town if it does pass? Attached.
Well, to be honest, it leaves the town no different from where it is right now, because there's no project, there's no project, there's no cost. So at the end of the day, if in theory the town voted in favor of this at this year's town meeting, and then once you went and we did the engineering study and we figured out what it was going to cost, and we had bids, and there was a number that said, okay, we have a plan, this is what it's going to look like, this is what it's going to cost. At that point, probably actually you would bring this again in front of the town with the number attached, and then the town would vote on it again with the amount in order to approve the actual project and presumably the borrowing for the amount of money. So, essentially it would be, you would do this all over again, but with an actual project. And the fact that the town voted in favor of it previously would have no real bearing on that future vote. Everyone would still just get to vote however they felt like at that town meeting.
Yeah. So, and that would be at the next town meeting, is that correct?
It would just depend on the timing on getting the engineering study and all the stuff, basically, yeah. So whenever all that was ready.
Okay, but this vote would not preclude the second vote, I'm hearing. This vote would almost be a symbolic vote, if you will, to then vote on the real proposal with a number attached. Is that fair to say?
I would say that that's fair to say. I would say that, I guess my warning to you, and this is just kind of based on my experience on advisory over the past several years and just discussing with people who have been town residents for decades, is that when something has a resounding defeat at town meeting, that becomes a very, very difficult hurdle or black mark to get over at subsequent town meetings. And we've seen this before with other projects. For example, I don't want to bring up a sore issue, but the turf field from last year, that's the second time that has been voted down. They were not exactly the same project, but I have no doubt that the fact that it was voted down the first time hampered it the second time around. So I would say my suspicion would be that your petition is headed for a very resounding defeat at town meeting. And if I were you, I would try to avoid that black mark. It seems like Sean already has something in place for you to begin getting an engineering study. So the ball is rolling, and I would just wait until you've got more data before you actually ask for essentially a referendum from the town as to whether this is a good idea or not. That's just my personal recommendation. You are welcome to do whatever you want.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. And so if, so what are the odds? Let's say it's withdrawn. What are the odds nothing happens? The ball stops rolling somehow, and we don't actually get an engineering assessment, or we just don't get enough information? Because I think as citizens, we've been caught in a bit of a catch-22 where, you know, there's frequently been pushback that we don't know how much it's going to cost, but until we get some action, like we can't figure out how much it costs. So
I mean, I think Sean's already taken action. He says that he's already contacted a couple of engineering firms and he's been approved to spend up to $20,000 on it. So I think it's not all talk. I think he's acting on it.
You want my answer?
Yeah, if you want to.
What's that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was asking me. We're beyond the point of me not acting. And for anyone that hasn't met John Hargrave, he's not going to stop. So there will be a number put to this. Again, it won't be before town meeting. But everything we've talked about, we can put numbers to. I couldn't go out ahead of it and have all those, but we will have those some point in the future. And everyone here, I'm pretty sure, knows John's coming back, and it'll be everything we're talking about right now, but it'll have a price tag.
And you know, it may be 20 years since I was on advisory for 6 years, and ending up in your hot seat, Steve. You know, John, I would just say let's chat next time you're cycling or whatever down the street, and happy to help in any way I can. Just because it's a difficult thing to do. I've been where you are today, and it's not. You've made a lot more progress than anybody else has ever made in getting the 20,000 approved for spending.
great, thank you guys.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion from advisory about this?
So will the study include both what it would cost, the cost benefit analysis? Someone mentioned cost benefit analysis for paving as well as doing drainage, or are we looking at one or the other? Or, let me try to re-ask the question again a little more articulately. So in my mind, it sounds like there are definitely costs associated with repairing this road on a regular basis. The runoff causes issues. Wondering, Sean, perhaps this is a question to you, whether when you do the engineering study, you know, we'll have, you know, one option being, yes, if we pave it and if we do all the drainage, then this is the cost benefit analysis. And another option would be, well, if we don't necessarily pave it, but we do the drainage, this is the cost benefit analysis.
Oh, the study would be the cost and permitting to fix the drainage and pave it. Fix the drainage, the base, you know, the road base needs to be, you know, dug out and rehabbed to some point. That needs to be assessed, and then build a road. We continually have to maintain that drainage as it is right now, because it's just the way it is. There is a block pipe. We had already tried to jet it and that failed. So there's either tree roots or it's crushed or there's a stone. I don't know. We were going to dig it up and repair that. That's a pretty big, it's a good sized job. So that's just going to be assessed as part of this.
Okay.
But to go to spending $20,000 on an engineer to tell us how to fix a drainage ditch, that's not what we're doing. We're going for the final fix, because there's, you know, this is no different than half the roads in Sherborn. The difference is we just never built it. But there's, you know, the side of Russet Hill has a drainage ditch that hasn't been maintained in 20 years, and it has the same issue. The town has just neglected it for the past 20 years. We're going to have to fix it this year. There's neighborhoods we haven't touched in 20 years. This road, I can't go 20 days without being on. So it's not like a magic secret. It is what it is. It needs to be constantly maintained because it's a gravel road. Other roads get hit once in 20 years. And then you just fill potholes and sweep them. And environmentally, there's no doubt that it's probably the worst road environmentally in town. Far worse than Green Lane.
So if I think it sounds like to fix the drainage without paving, it's really not going to fix the issue. So it's not really a matter of drainage. It sounds like the drainage needs to be fixed and the road needs to be paved to resolve the issues so that we don't have to maintain the road every 20 days. Is that correct?
If we want to see the true cost benefit, we do both. Again, I've mentioned this before. It should be no secret. Chris probably has distinct memories of this 20 years ago. Green Lane would be a different topic. If I said I want to fix the drainage and pave it, 75% of the people in Green Lane would say, fix the drainage and don't you dare talk about paving it. This is different. And by the way, there is a cost benefit to paving Green Lane. More so than Rockwood. But in this instance, if we're going to spend the money and we're going to look at it, the goal would be for DPW to not have to visit Jade Hardgrave every other week. So where's the benefit? Don't go down there anymore, which is fix the drainage, pave it, and say, see ya. We'll just plow it. That'll be the end of it. And it'll be just like the rest of the roads that we really don't touch every 20 years.
Let's see, I've got Chris Brown and John Hargrave with hands up. I didn't know, Chris, is that still left over? All right, John.
I just want to say, when we get this road paved, we have a vision for having an amazing block party at the end of our road. You saw that amazing dead end. We got this giant area down there by Douse Orchard, and I want to have an amazing block party, invite everybody from Sherborn there. We're going to call it Rock the Block because we're Rockwood Street. And I can't wait to do that. But we're not voting on that right now. That's going to be a separate petition that we're going to file. I yield the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there are no more questions or comments from advisory. All right, thank you. Let's move on. We've got two budget discussions. First up, we have the sustainability department, I should say. So this essentially, I think this was brought up because there was some confusion when we were discussing the sustainability budget, partly because of the fact, I think, that Gino and Dorothea's salary lines are in different departments. And then there was some confusion as well about when and where those hours added up to where they are now, because I believe when the position was initially approved at town meeting, it was, I believe it was a 19-hour position, and now in total they're sort of over 30 hours. And for me also, there is some confusion about the position itself of the sustainability coordinator, because of the fact that the duties are divided between the two coordinators, and there is some question about who they report to or who they are getting direction from, and then for me as well, and probably for a lot of advisory, a question of how the job performance of the sustainability coordinators is to be tracked and measured and reviewed essentially by, well, I guess we're still not sure exactly who is primarily in charge. So these are all the kind of like questions that I wanted to try to clear up. And also I believe this discussion was at the request of some other advisory members. So I wanted to open the floor to the rest of advisory for any additional questions or comments that they have for the sustainability department. And we have both of the coordinators here, and we also have representatives from the Energy Committee. So I guess first off, I wanted to give the coordinators an opportunity to speak or present. I know, Dorothea, you had emailed me a PowerPoint presentation that you wanted me to share. Did you want me to put that up right now, or were there any other sort of comments that either of you wanted to say first?
I have some slides also that are going to go first.
Okay, great.
And plus, but Michael needs to open the Energy Committee meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, turns out that we do have the whole committee here, so therefore I want to formally open up an Energy and Sustainability Committee meeting at 9:02. Okay, and we had talked before, I guess, Gino, I guess I have also some talking points to address some of the issues you just outlined.
Okay.
But I think Gino,
whatever order you guys want to go in is fine.
Okay, I'll let Gino start and then we go from there.
Okay, first, I'm going to go through a few quick slides as is Dorothea, but just want to note that Dorothea and I and the Energy and Sustainability Committee work together as a team, and that's how it was set up under David Williams, and we've continued to follow that pattern. But anyway, let me start by sharing my screen. Okay. Wait, did I do? I went through all the slides. Let me start over. It's just going slow, I guess. Okay, so we have two main goals, each with two parts. One is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from both the town government and town residents. And we have financial goals to obtain grants and to reduce operational costs. So in terms of grants, in the last couple of years, we have Green Communities grant to replace the street lights on within Sherborn and do some weatherization projects. We have grants for 2 charging stations, a level 2 and a level 3. Only level 2 is installed so far. We had a grant for a geothermal feasibility study, and we had grants for school and community programs from the Green Spoon Foundation, totaling about $144,000. Associated with the grants were the Eversource charging station infrastructure, which is worth $50,000 plus. The Eversource also had an incentive for the LED streetlights of $21,900. And I include Complete Streets here mainly because this one Complete Streets project is for the Sanger Street sidewalk to be done this week, but it promotes walking and bicycling as opposed to driving. As far as operational costs, just one example, street lights. The bill for January 2021 was $2,345. 2022 January, $601. February bill, $2,171, and in 2022, $491. Essentially, buying the lights cut the cost in half, and then converting to LED, cut it in half again. And it's important to note that this is more of a cut than it seems to be because the kilowatt hour cost is higher today than it was in 2021. I don't know why it's not advancing. Okay, I think I might have missed. I think it advanced 2 screens at a time. Okay, yeah, here we go. So this is another example of the operational costs. The total cost of electricity for the town in FY18, the consumption was 920,000 kilowatt hours. The cost was 76,000. By FY21, the use had been cut more than 10% to 802,000, yet the cost was up like 30% or so. Natural gas was a little more stable, but has a similar pattern, just not as dramatic. This shows the energy usage in terms of BTU, millions of BTUs, broken down by categories. So as you can see, we had an 18.8% reduction in consumption from our baseline. This is from the Green Communities annual report. Our base year for Green Communities was 2009, which of course was quite a while ago. But even from 2019, there's a significant decrease. The other categories are not as significant, but the regional schools are included in this as well, and their consumption in 2021 was higher than it was in 2009, but less than it was in 2019. And then, as I said, one of our main goals is greenhouse gas emissions. So this, again, this is from a state website called Mass Energy Insight that tracks our consumption. The utility companies report to it directly, so it's kind of automatic for us. So we show 36% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from our 2010 level. So that's just a brief overview. And now I'll turn it over to Dorothea. She has a few more slides.
Yes.
Stop sharing.
Thank you, Gino. Stephen, I have difficulties with my computer in the last 3 days. And
I will.
Interestingly, it coincides with Gino.
I mean, like, do you use the same model computer as Gino?
No, I have an AirBook, and Gino, I think you have a desktop at the office, but so if you may, you can you? Yes, this looks right. Maybe you can enlarge the slides in your function. Good. So I have been trying to condense my presentation today in 5 slides. Initially, I just wanted to do 2, but it's quite complex. And I think this is the first presentation to this board, to you. And I would like to bring you along in learning what I'm actually have done in the last 2 years and what I'm currently working on, so you get a better understanding how I use my hours, with whom I collaborate, and what my goals are, because that's pretty clear when I was taking on this job. To me, it was represented that my primary goal is to reduce our community-wide greenhouse gas emissions. And this slide presents to you what I have been worked on in the first 4 to 5 months. And without further ado, I just want you to focus on the problem we are having. So this pie chart breaks out all the carbon emissions, and the light green on the left side is the passenger vehicles, 44.3%. and the light blue on the right side is the residential buildings, representing basically emissions coming from burning fossil fuels for heating and cooling, and the electricity load in the buildings. And I think this base is based on 2017 data. So it is not representing emissions from the regional school district or our Sherborn's share in that. So this was my first task I have completed, and based on that, I have started my outreach and engagement portfolio, so to speak, because I see it this way. We need to basically bring people on board what they can do easily and with little money. I'm calling it the low-hanging fruit, and I'm reaching out to all different kinds of segments in our community to learn about how they can do it. For example, on your right-hand side, you see a poster of a recent webinar that we have given at the schools. Some students were helping us with that, and a really engaged citizen, David Green from Dover, and was very well attended and presented ways of like reducing emissions from housing, how to basically the benefits of electric vehicles, and the other choices people can take to reduce their carbon emissions. Stephen, would you please get to the next one? Thank you. So this is something that I basically is a slide that I have in my satchel all the time when I go to speak people, whether it be a senior cafe or whether it be at the schools or whether it be with boards and committees like you, because people need to learn that the Massachusetts roadmap to net zero carbon emissions that was signed into law by the governor, Baker, is basically quite a gargantuan task. And we need to bring that conversation further in the community. I think everybody on the ESC is very aware about these gargantuan steps that have been laid out by the state and by different states in the country. And what it really means is that our current carbon emissions, 38,000 metric tons CO2 need to be reduced by 2030, 19,000 metric tons. And then by 2050, and I'm trying to figure out how old I will be at 2050. My kids will be married and I might be a grandparent, but Sherborn by then needs to have basically no emissions or virtually no emissions. And to achieve that, we really have to work with the residents, as I explained earlier. So Stephen, could you advance please to the next slide? So here are the programs that I have developed with the help of the Energy Committee, Energy and Sustainability Committee in the last 2 years. And we think, or I think, that these are addressing residential carbon reductions in the community. First of all, the ESC has worked already when I joined them on the electrical aggregation program. And without going into it now, I think all of you understand that this is a means for the town to purchase or bulk purchase energy at a comparable price to the current Eversource rate, but with a higher renewable value or mix in it. And the upper slide shows you where we currently are with a couple of other communities. We're literally waiting for the DPU approval. And I was listening to a webinar last night, yesterday, by the Green Energy Consumer Alliance, and Larry Chrétien, the CEO of that nonprofit, was mentioning that our application could advance as quick as 2 months or could take as long as several more months until the end of the year. It's not clear, but if it comes along, it'll be quite a bit of collaboration needed from all of the boards, especially from select board, from the interim town manager, because we will go out and into a bidding process to see if there is better pricing for us as we are currently contracting to. So this is one big step of decreasing our carbon emissions in town. The second one, which I always talk about as a non-brainer, is the Mass Safe Home Energy Audit. And some of you might have already done it, but a lot of Sherborn residents have either no clue at all or just simply don't know what it is. And it is something that all Sherbornites have paid for through an electrical surcharge to their utility, and that they simply don't use. So this chart tells you, this is from Eversource, this kind of breakout of communities. At the bottom, I couldn't enlarge that. It says 230 households have participated in this program, which is abysmal because it's just 16% participation from Sherbornites, whereas the average of participating households in all other Massachusetts communities is around 20%. So we have to do more on that. For that, Energy and Sustainability Committee, and I have reached out to All in Energy, which is a nonprofit that helps us promoting the Mass Energy home energy assessment more effectively to Sherbornites. And Michael Lesser and I will present to you on the 24th on that program. But most importantly is the third point, which is the Regional Residential Climate Program. And I'm a little bit proud of myself to have actually reached out to sustainability coordinators, managers in adjacent communities that I knew personally from my previous work at Wellesley College and through my advocacy work in my resident town, Needham. I'm elected town meeting member in Needham since 10 years, and I met a lot of people at MAPC. And through these connections, I have been going out and asking the question, how should we tackle this residential sector? And everybody in all different communities around us, every sustainability coordinator is scratching their heads and asking themselves, how do we get residents to make these deep and steep investments to get to net zero? And this is where we are. We have worked out and a kind of like approach. Our lead community is Natick. The sustainability coordinator, Jillian Wilson Martin, is tremendous in banding everybody together and to push it through state agencies. And we have acquired through her $25,000 of a technical assistant grant from MAPC to do joint outreach and engagement with all of these 10 plus Metro West communities so that we can consistently help residents to adopt air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, and solar PV. Stephen, could you advance please to the next slide? So people are asking often, what kind of programs do you do in terms of engagement? And I just put something together here, which is not comprehensive, but it gives you a little bit of like an overview of all the different neck of woods I'm working in. So we have a bunch of really engaged citizens. I want to say, and I have to look at my data if you want to know more, but we have more homes with solar than we previously assumed. I was going out to the DOER and have worked through the ranks up to lawyers to give us all the homes that have gotten incentives for installing renewable energy systems. So I have written to these people in town and told them, you're early adopters. Can you help us? Talking to other neighbors of yours, how you basically started the process. And this is a program I'm coming up with during Earth Day weekend. We're going to do a Sherborn open house tour. The house you see right there is from Tom Trainer and his wife. And I hope that people will just understand that this is not too difficult if they have people in the neighborhood to ask. Next picture is, you see,
sorry.
oh, excuse me.
I thought you meant to go to the next.
Yes, sorry about that. No, the next picture is a V show that our valued member, Fred Cunningham, has put on through Upper Child's Climate Action. And there were 4 events, 2 in Sherborn and 1 in Hollis and Ashland. A ton of cars were exhibited. A lot of people from other towns came to show their EVs and talk one-on-one with residents who want to do that step. Next, the next kind of vehicle. Then Gina has applied for the charger at Town Hall, and there will more to become. I have done the Cooler Community Sherborn School Fair, which I will put on this year as well. And with the Arts and Crafts Show, we will have 2 booths, and the vendor, All in Energy, is scheduled to meet residents to talk about the Mass Safe Home Energy Assessment. And lastly, because tonight somebody was talking about climate change taking place, we see erosion in town. We have put on with the Charles River Watershed Association a virtual conversation about climate change impacts in Sherborn and how our community can become more climate resilient. Please come to this. It's a Tuesday night. We have conveniently set it on a Tuesday night, not on a Wednesday or Thursday. And it's important that people talk about their experiences, because I know we have residents that don't have AC in their homes. I was in Illinois last summer where my daughter was in a sports competition, and I talked to people that explained to me that it was so hot and muggy in Chicago that they had to run AC at a local elementary school and bring residents to that school for cooling. And I was asking myself, are we prepared in Sherborn to do the same? So these are things that we really need to wrap our heads around in a group and really discuss where we have to make investments. And then Stephen, last slide, I think, comes up now.
All right. And Dorothea, can I just ask you to speed it up, just because
yes,
I intended for this to be a budget discussion, and this is turning into a long presentation about all of the things that you do, which is wonderful, but it's outside of the scope of what advisory
fully
is
understood. And we, Stephen, I will give you just a head, because if people want to debate, if this is a position that you can afford to just scratch off, and I'm afraid to tell you, probably not, because what's ahead is big. A lot of communities embracing a climate action plan because of what I just mentioned. And there will 5 things on the plate for the sustainability department, for the ESC, and for the boards that will have a lot of say in this in the next 10 years, or 5 to 7 years until 2030. Climate action plan, electrification roadmap for the schools, and programs for the residents. And lastly, what do we do with our open space and ecosystems? And I want to thank everybody for their support and the future collaboration in this really big effort. Thanks, Stephen.
Hi. You stopped sharing. I'm going to share my screen. I just have to things to attend to on your. let's
Okay.
see.
Can you be quick, Michael?
Yes, I will be quick. I'm trying to tie into some of your, you see this, nothing like going last to get the fresher, but the tying around, trying to tie up some of the above presentations to some of the issues you raised in the beginning, which are there. There's a lot of work to be done. And part of your questions is what's the process, how we're doing it, the accountability and such. We've been thinking more now, given where we are now and what we've achieved so far, that it's time to basically do a more explicit process of integrating with the select board and sort of the accountability there as to, because the job in a sense has been reporting to the town administrator, that this is something that we're going to want to talk to the select board about, that we've just been recently developing based on our trying to figure out what we're going to do going forward in this year and going beyond, of a process here that would evolve, as you see here, literally the coordinators and the Energy and Sustainability Committee drafting a kind of a work plan, like an annual work plan or something a little bit longer, that would also be amenable to sort of the accountability and evaluation, that we could develop something in the first step there, which shouldn't take very long, assuming this is a process that we come to terms with the select board. And then we have meetings with the select board and the town administrator to basically agree on the plan, to then work on it so that we're clear about what the tasks are that we've all agreed to that have high priority, and how we're going to evaluate whether they're successful or not. And then we do the work, obviously in combination with a lot of other groups, with the process of some regular reporting about how it's going and evaluating what's effective, making adjustments. As part of doing a plan, we'd have to come up with a time frame for how things are going there, and who's doing what work. To date, we've had some allocations where essentially Gino, given his expertise and experience, has been working more on the municipal town operations. Dorothea has been working much more on the outreach to residents there. But we all collaborate. I mean, we each help each other on different parts of it there, even with the committee itself, all the members here. And then in terms of part of this work would be refining what it is what the goals and metrics are. As has been brought up before, the two main things are whether we have energy cost savings to both the town and to residents. A lot of the work we do with residents is also hopefully it's not just the second goal there of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but there's also cost savings that they can have too, so that these investments, there's a win-win between addressing climate change and our own personal pocketbook. And there's also the issue of raising funds along the way for town projects and for residential programs, which we've done a little of, but they're much less available. But there are efforts now. There's a group that we all work with here that's meeting with Senator Barrett about just trying to get money in there for programs to deal with the residential outreach. And on the residential outreach, basically, it's a lot of work to support. So the part of the problem of the issue of doing a work plan or a strategic plan is to figure out what are the priorities. Dorothea listed some of the ones that are our priorities for going forward. And with the mass save audits and the aggregation and working on some of the heat pumps, because that's the biggest use for the heating and cooling is the biggest use we have in the home. And you can see other things here about how we try to integrate it. But in essence, we'll try to have a more sort of a subset of an overall plan that are our priorities for a coming period of time, that we come to agreement with the select board and residents as a means of getting an overall consensus about what it is we're working on, and have some accountability for showing that different things, what things work and don't work. And that once we have agreement with the select board and the town administrator on a work plan, and then there's the reporting to the select board and to the town administrator by doing it regularly. And these efforts could be expanded, and we have to figure out what that work plan is and the priorities, and to what extent we get involved in some of the other resilience for town infrastructure or water conservation and for the groundwater sustainability issues. So in trying to embark on this process. Hopefully this will address some of your issues about how we're going to march forward and have some ability. There'll be some reporting that could be more definitive in terms of what's working and not working, and what we've achieved in terms of some of these metrics. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Yes, so well, thank you all three of you for all that information. It was more than I needed, probably. Michael, can you unshare your your screen there? Yeah, so I think what I wanted to talk about is, I mean, we've already reviewed your budget, but then there were issues that came up as to essentially the value that is being added for the town by the sustainability coordinators, and then sort of the challenge basically in tracking that, and as you said, the accountability for it. And so I think that was the impetus for bringing you guys back up to advisory. I like a lot of the things that you were pointing out there, Michael. I think from my perspective, it's that, you know, we haven't been tracking the sustainability department very well as an advisory committee because it didn't exist as its own department within the budget, and it was a bit broken up. I think that we were surprised to find out that the number of total hours had gone up from what we were anticipating, and you know, essentially, there's in the accounting of what the sustainability department has been doing, you know, I understand that it isn't necessarily going to be a one-to-one sort of dollar payment of you've brought in grant money and that's paid for yourself and that is your sole purpose. I know that when the sustainability coordinator position was first pitched to town meeting, to advisory and to town meeting, you know, there was talk of the, you know, 3x, 4x, 5x return in grant money relative to their sustainability coordinator salary. I mean, frankly, I was skeptical of that to begin with. And I don't expect that moving forward, there is going to be perpetually a 3x, 4x, 5x return on the salary that is being given to the sustainability coordinators. But that said, as you've noted, there is value to what they're doing, particularly from a carbon emissions perspective, not just you know, an electricity bill savings to individual residents. As Dorothea noted, there's the net zero mandate by 2050. So then it becomes a matter of, okay, how are we going to track that? And how are you going to demonstrate the value to the town by saying, okay, well, our activities is there a way to track the amount of the tons of carbon that have been reduced over the past year? Is there a way to track the number of, you know, electric vehicles that have been purchased in town and registered, the number of, I don't know if you're able to track the number of, you know, air source or ground source heat pumps that have been installed, solar panels that have been installed, you know, just an accounting that will give advisory an idea of, okay, we've brought in X amount of grant money, that's great. And then furthermore, we have also reduced carbon emissions in the town by X number of tons, which may have a particular monetary value that you guys, the Energy Committee, can determine. You know, I think that's the perspective I'm coming from. I would like to hear from other advisory members, though, because I know that my perspective may not be the prevalent one.
Well, I'll jump in. I would applaud what you've said, Michael, about your plan to have some metrics here. I agree with Steve. You know, I think metrics are important, not just from the point of view of advisory and, you know, how we view the position, but just, you know, from the point of view of the folks who are working in these positions as well, you know, so that they can have some concrete successes to point to. You know, working with kids at Pine Hill, at the region, you know, it's all great. Talking to other towns, all great, but you know, that doesn't really give us any specific sense of what is a particular goal that has been met, or how have we moved the ball forward. Gino, thank you very much for all the information you've given us about the grants. that you've been successful in getting, and that's extremely helpful because we did, I think when this position was first sold to the town, it was sold with the understanding that it would pay, at least pay for itself. And Gino, you've more than done that, so we appreciate that. But you know, what we're really trying to do here is get better from an environmental standpoint. And I'm not sure that we have any clear metrics right now that show us how or whether we're doing that. And so, Michael, all your efforts that you're describing to get to that point, I think are great. I also have a question. Steve, you had raised this at the beginning of the meeting before the presentations. Not clear to me exactly who the sustainability coordinators report to. So maybe some clarification on that point would be helpful.
All right, I've got Dorothea's hand up first and then Michael after.
Wait, reaction. Yes, I wanted to answer to Jane's question about following the metrics. And there is ways how we can actually find out every year what residents do, but it involves a little bit of digging up the data because the state has not basically streamlined that. So for me, finding out who has basically solar in Sherborn, I literally needed to go through a lawyer at DOER and put in kind of like a written request and meet 3 times to explain why that is important. So I can do that every year to give, you know, as advisory board a better idea what, you know, how many people do things. That is, there's definitely a way to do that. It will involve some time, but I'm completely on an agreement that it needs to be tracked for, you know, for a climate action plan to really show progress, because we are now on a trajectory where we have the mandate to reduce these emissions. And then I wanted to follow up on a comment of yours. And I don't know if, you know, I have been going through these slides too quickly, or if I didn't really explain well what the regional climate residential program is. So I'm talking to other towns to synergize on the work I'm doing. And that's what everybody else is doing as well, because the enormous task to basically guiding residents on improving their homes for saving dollars and saving emissions or reducing emissions at the same time is something that not a single person in a town can do. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I'll start with following up with what Dorothy said about the collaboration with the other towns. Part of that program is actually a formal RFQ so that we can actually find contractors for different interventions, such as the heat pumps, that are formally approved, so that we have an ability to say that we can defend when we go to do programs with residents, that there are certain suppliers that we can recommend based on a formal process. Because a big hurdle for a lot of people in adopting things is who to go to, who to choose, who's good. And this is a way that towns as a group have decided that, okay, we can, as a group, it's much cheaper to go out as a group to get that kind of certification, that sort of vetting. So that allows us to actually recommend people that way, and so that people more actually adopt things. And then following up with the metrics thing, is that right? We haven't probably done a good enough job of publicizing things, but right, we do the metrics in the sense of that we have to put it together for the streetlights effort, for example. The reduction in energy, basically we reduced the electricity use by 73%. You can convert that to equivalent to, it's like the equivalent of not driving 50,000 miles in a year. There's lots of different, we have the tons of carbon, we can value it. We can sort of, we have to come up with a more comprehensive tally of how all these things sum up to these kind of, besides the energy cost reductions of being anywhere from up to $25,000 a year, possibly on the streetlights. Right, the greenhouse gas reductions, we do measure it. We just have to put it together. It's part of spending the time to come up with that kind of framework so that we can more readily put on the table. This is what this thing here had here. This many people converted to heat might have done heat pumps. This has this kind of contribution. This is where we have been going. We've been collecting it, but we're not there yet. But this will obviously push us to be much more systematic, and it gets higher on the list to pull that together. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Gino.
Yes, to answer the question about reporting and the organizational chart, it was very clear from the very beginning that Dorothea and I both would report to the town administrator. There was lots of discussion about that, and because there was some consideration that maybe we should report to the energy. At the time, it was just called the Energy Committee, and it was decided by the select board and town administrator that no, we should report to the town administrator. However, while doing that, we're under the general direction of the Energy and Sustainability Committee. We both attend their meetings, every one of them. We discuss the projects, we work together, and we come up with a plan of action, and we meet often. So it's not like we get off, go off on a tangent. We meet about every 2 weeks, sometimes every 3 weeks, for an hour, hour and a half. And, we stay on track that way. So if that helps, I just wanted to point that out.
Thanks, that does help. I think ultimately it just helps to have a clear reporting structure. I mean, the way that I see you guys, I would say the nearest analogy would be the way that the advisory committee works with the finance director. I mean, we work closely with the finance director. The finance director does a lot of things at our request, and she helps us do our job, but she very clearly does not report to the advisory committee, and we have no authority over her whatsoever. So I think having the clarity in the reporting structure is fairly important. So I'm glad that at least that seems to be clear.
So everybody's salaries under the town administrator's budget, right?
Well, that's one thing I would probably right now, Gino's sustainability portion still is under the planning board. I would probably recommend that Gino's sustainability hours move into the actual sustainability department along with Dorothea's, just because I would prefer to see all of the sustainability activity under a single department. That would just be my opinion. I don't know if you guys have a different opinion of that, but.
No, actually, that's the way it has been, and it was the town administrator had suggested for FY23 to move it into the planning board, my portion into the planning board budget, just to make it simpler from that point of view, from one individual being under one entity. But it's for the first couple of years, it has been all under the select board budget.
Good. I don't know, Deb, is there a reason why we wouldn't be able to just say, because now the sustainability is its own department, just put all sustainability stuff into that
Yeah,
department?
I just need direction from the town administrator to do that. And it's not a problem to do that, as if everybody's on board, that's easy enough to be done.
Yeah. And if it's easier to get that done for next year, I mean, we're not going to be super confused about it this year, but I would say that going forward, that makes more sense to me.
Okay, yeah, I'll talk to Diane tomorrow, make sure she's on board, because, it still does report to the town administrator and it's under the select board budget. So, yeah, no problem.
All right. I feel like I'm actually ready to kind of wrap up this point, but Dorothea and Michael both have your hands up. Do you have something quick that you wanted to add?
Steve, may I chime in? I don't think anyone from advisory has had a
Yeah,
chance
no,
to
I was
chime
just,
in yet.
Yeah, no, I was going to give you all a chance to chime in before I actually closed it, but just because I had two other hands up, I was like, you guys have both talked a lot. Do you really have more to say? So, Michael, do you have something quick that you wanted to add?
I was first, and I'm
Or
just
yes, sorry,
quickly
Dorothy.
saying about the reporting structure. I did a little bit of research because I was connecting with colleagues from other towns, and it is, in my perspective, almost everywhere, or at least with the people I talked, all sustainability coordinators reporting to the town manager or administrator. So there is a direct line, and they are collaborating with the with energy committee. And you know, I understand there was a breakdown of communication in the last couple of years, and I'm looking forward to have one really strong established with the future she or he that will be leading with you guys. And that's that.
Thank you. Michael?
And I will just quickly say that now that it's its own department, that the department and the energy committee, even though you guys have a million things to do, and I applaud all the work you do, that maybe we could have a liaison next year.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There, and that would make the process go better too,
Yep.
even with more work.
For sure. All right, opening up to advisory members for additional discussion.
So Steve, I really wanted to get this comment very early on from when you started opening this. The last thing you'd mentioned is the performance of the sustainability person. And one question I had, we don't have anything to do with the performance of anybody. So why are we kind of discussing the performance of the sustainability coordinators? From our perspective as advisory, that's not really, I mean, it's not my understanding that we don't need to see the metrics. Now there's, of course, there was the town meeting. The way this position was sold to the town is that it will pay for itself. And you know, I expect whoever made that promise to work to satisfy that promise to the town, right? You know, and but that's not something, you know, in terms of the performance, I don't think that's something we usually look into, right? So that's really just a question, like, why are we? I mean, it's great, by the way. I'm not saying anything about. I'm not saying anything about you know, having the metrics. Having the metric is wonderful, but we, you know, we don't ask anyone for metrics otherwise, right?
That's true. I think the reason why this came up is because of the fact that the hours for the sustainability coordinator position went up significantly from its inception, and that was something that occurred without advisory's input. And then I think there then became a significant question of why did that happen? What are they doing? And what is the value that they're bringing? Like, why? Essentially, I mean, this is something that the previous town administrator did with multiple positions, which was to approve very significant increases in hours in the middle of a fiscal year. And then in subsequent years, it becomes advisory's job to review that and approve it essentially retrospectively. So somebody's already working here or has already had their hours significantly increased, and now it sets us up to be the bad guys to say, wait, why did you do that? Nobody said anything to us about that, and now you know, we're asking them to justify the reason why these hours are needed, and of course we're working a bit of a step behind because of the fact that this is not before the position is approved, it's long after it's already been functioning. And it makes our job difficult if we don't have any sort of a performance metric or that performance aspect of why is this position needed. So I think that was the genesis of that. Does that answer your question?
Steve, so that clarifies it. So essentially we need to have metrics to justify the increase in hours, essentially, is what you're saying. Really, it's not necessarily the performance of whoever is in that role. It's, you know, from our perspective, it's really justifying the hours, the increase in hours?
Yes, I would say so. Yeah. And, in terms of the performance, because I know that there had been some amount of confusion about who the sustainability coordinators were actually taking direction from and who they were effectively beholden to. I think that became part of the issue as well, which again, for me, I'm like, we're not HR. It's not really our position, our place to tell you how to do it. But I kind of wanted to have this meeting and just be like, you guys have to figure it out. Yeah, you have to sort it out. You have to have a more structured plan in place, because that makes it a lot easier for us as advisory to evaluate the performance of the department as a whole to justify its annual budget ask, basically. So
Thank you. Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yep. Dorothea, if you don't mind, I'm just going to hold off on you in case there are any other advisory comments. Dan, go ahead.
Just to very briefly add, this is prompted by Wasim's question. So, right, the way this was sold to the town was that the position would pay for itself. Gino, you provided a wonderful set of information on grants that have come in. I think that's just terrific. But a lot of what we heard tonight is not about the position paying for itself through grants, but about other goals, other things in terms of greenhouse gas emissions that our goals and have been and are hoped to be accomplished. And I think if we say, as Steve said earlier, look, probably not actually going to happen, that grants are kind of going to come in at 3 or 4 times the cost, the dollar cost of the town of the positions, then I think it becomes natural to look at other metrics to think about, given these other goals, maybe these softer goals, how would we track progress towards these softer goals as in a way, thinking about return on investment, but not literally a dollar return on investment, but a broader return on investment. And so I think I would kind of second the commentary here about the value of thinking about not individual performance, because again, as Wasim said, that's not advisory's job, but in thinking about metrics, given that probably the right way to evaluate this isn't solely in terms of what's the grant dollar coming in relative to salary. And that's probably not the right way to evaluate it, even if that's how it may have been sold in the past. And so that puts some of these other metrics, I think, a little more front and center.
Yeah, for sure. And I would underscore the fact that I think the sustainability coordinators have always said that we work as a team, we work well together as a team. And I want to also stress that our job as advisory is not to look at individuals and say, is this person doing a good job or not? I want to look at the whole team, the entire department, and say, what is this department doing for the town? And again, collectively, that's going to be a certain amount of grant money coming in, and hopefully it's going to be a certain amount of outreach, which is hopefully resulting in a certain amount of, carbon reducing activities. And then the key is, how are we tracking those carbon reducing activities so that we can say, the sustainability department as a whole is doing X, Y, or Z, in the same way that I'm not going to be evaluating the performance of the fire chief or the police chief, but, we as advisory are essentially evaluating the performance of the fire department and the police department as a whole as, a justification for the budget number that they're asking for. And I'm asking for the same thing from the sustainability department as a whole, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. It's getting late. Almost 10. Got more things to talk about. Michael, be fast.
I wanted to get the ability to adjourn our meeting.
Okay.
But I also just say that, right, the metrics are important to us just to decide what it is we're doing and what we should be doing and what we could doing better, and to decide what to do, so that there's a much broader, bigger purpose about what the metrics are in terms of getting the town seeing that the town is on its path to its goals for reductions. And plus, there are real hard numbers. It's not all soft. There are hard numbers about cost savings to town operations, as well as cost savings to our residents, for the fact that putting solar systems on their homes, they actually can make money on it, so that it isn't all soft. and some of the costs of climate change are pretty hard. But getting the sense that this is the end of the discussion, I would like to, I have to move to adjourn the Energy and Sustainability Committee meeting at 9:55, and I have to do that by a roll call vote, so give me 30 seconds. Tom, if he's still here.
Aye.
Okay.
I'm here.
Fred.
Aye.
Andy still here?
Yep, aye.
Brad?
Aye.
And I'm missing somebody.
Frank.
Frank, yes.
Aye.
Okay, good. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much for your time tonight, everybody.
Thank you all. All right, moving on. Dave Goldberg, I'm so sorry about how late we are here. I swear I did not expect all of those things to have taken as long as they did.
It's quite all right. I'll go fast.
Yeah, all right. So basically just like I told you in the email, you know, in your first presentation, some advisory members had were interested in seeing sort of different tiers of ways that you might be able to manage your budget and the facilities in town. And so I just wanted to bring you back before the actual public hearing to see what you had.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the suggestions was, or one of the, I think, issues that a lot of people had was that we had really only gotten one quote. And so we went back out and essentially put together an RFP. So to kind of give you a sense of the scope of work for the RFP that we put out, between Laurel, Jameson, and Pheasant, we're talking about 20 acres worth of turf that we have to manage. Keep in mind, this doesn't include like we have a separate sort of company that we use for maintaining the baseball infield. So that's outside the scope of work. So that would be things like, you know, getting the pitcher's mounds and home plate and so forth set up. So this is really just about grass maintenance. So we look at the various services that we asked for in the RFP. And again, this was based off of Doug, who manages our facilities, the frequency and the recommendations that you know, that he had put together based off of the years that he's been managing these fields. For the most part, we're talking about 20 acres for just about everything, with the exception of the deep tine aeration and the top dressing, which we just do over at Pheasant because of the drainage issues that we have over there. But you can see here, this is essentially what we asked for people to bid on. I didn't solely take Doug's word for what needed to be done. We did actually go out to a company, PJC Organics. They consult with the city of Marblehead. They actually help with their organic field maintenance. And they came back to us with recommendations in terms of how often we should be doing some of the things that we were talking about, we were suggesting, based off of the different types of fields. So they sort of break it down into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 3 is mostly parks, right? They're very lightly used, if at all, for sports. So really, you know, focusing on tier 1 and tier 2, based off the usage in terms of Laurel, it's our primary facility in town. We're probably closer to a tier 1 facility. It gets a lot of use, and you can see the recommendations that they make per year for a tier 1 or a tier 2 facility. Again, Fezzi is a little special because of the deep tine aeration and the top dress we need there for, so that wouldn't obviously be in their normal recommendations, but you can see it. You know, Doug's recommendations for our fields are pretty much in line for somewhere between a tier 1 and a tier 2 facility as recommended by PJC. So again, it's just a good sanity check to make sure that the things we're doing are consistent with what other towns would be doing. I also did go back and dig through what we've spent on field maintenance over the last 5 years. You can see, you know, we try and spend as much as we feel is appropriate given what we have, what we brought in terms of revenue. So, you know, some years we do more than others. Like last year, I think we spent a significant amount on seeding. And so that's why you see that spike there. But generally, you know, our maintenance isn't anywhere in line with what you would expect from, any of the recommendations that I showed earlier. Again, we make do with what we have, but it certainly is less than you would expect to keep a field in the shape that we need it to be. So in terms of the responses to the RFP, if we look at what came back from Shrewsbury Landscaping, they kind of quoted it all out. Total for everything they quoted was about 165, which again was a little bit higher. They were the ones who gave us the original estimate of 135. We did add another seating in there, so that's why it's a little bit higher than our ask for our budget. Again, I think it shows that the request we made was actually pretty conservative. There's another 7,500 in there. There's a lot of things that just happen throughout the year. Either working on the roots or dealing with grubs or what have you. So there's about 7,500 in there. That's for things that are outside of sort of the normal field maintenance. I should also mention we do have some leeway in terms of you notice that grass seed is probably the biggest expense in this in the breakdown of the services. We do have some leeway in terms of the density of the grass that we put down. Either we do 8 bags per acre, 9 bags per acre, or 10 bags per acre. This estimate you see here is the middle tier, so that's the 9 bags per acre. There is a little bit of leeway to kind of reduce that a little bit with obviously the impact that you won't get as lush of a turf. If we move to the second of the RFPs, again, Shrewsbury was the one that came in the lowest. The next one came in at about 180, and the third came in at about 196. And the reason why the overseeding is red there is they actually didn't quote us that, but I took the average of the two prior to just kind of get some sort of sense of what it would cost, and that's not a significant amount anyway. But they came in much higher than the third. So I guess that's all I have from a presentation perspective, just to kind of give you a sense that I think that the amount that we were asking for is fairly conservative. We'll have to make do even with that amount to try and get the the maintenance that we feel is required for the fields. But again, anything less than that is really just going to take away from some of the services and impact the quality.
Thanks.
Yep.
I guess I'll open up to advisory if you guys have any questions, comments, discussion.
Everyone's done. It's 10.
Yeah, no, everyone's pretty done.
Either
right?
that
Yeah.
or it was a great presentation.
Oh, it was amazing. Dan, go ahead.
Yes, it was amazing. Thanks, Dave. So I was one of the ones who previously had wondered about whether there might be some different kind of tiers or maybe more of a transition plan. So, it's a lot of money. And it's a lot of money every year, looking ahead for many, many years. So I think what I was wondering is not so much 3 bids to kind of, make the point that the number you came up with is a sensible number, maybe conservative as it turned out for this level of maintenance, but what would the possibilities be of either stepping down and doing something a little less ambitious, at least initially? So that would be potentially alternative option 1, and alternative option 2 being whether you've had an opportunity to kind of talk with, say, DPW, and is there any possibility that they might be able to do part of this? Maybe they need one piece of equipment and then they could do some of this, and that, maybe there'd be some either alternative 1, alternative 2 that might not get quite all the way here, but would get part way there, make things better than they are at not quite such a big chunk of money every year. So that's what, when I had raised that question about other tiers, those were the couple of things that I was thinking about and wondering about.
Yeah, and those are they all make sense. We did sit down with DPW and talk about equipment that they might have, which unfortunately for a lot of this stuff, we don't have the right equipment, the skill, the knowledge, as well as, just the overall labor. And at this point, there really wasn't anything that we could get from DPW to offset some of the costs. We talked about the possibility of trying to do that years out. So maybe going back for a capital request to try and get some of the equipment that we need, and also to ensure that, we're not right now for DPW necessarily their highest priority. So they do a great job, but at the same time, like some of these things, if the same people get pulled off to, let's say, take a tree off off of a road that's fallen, right? And if we've got a schedule that we've got to keep to, just trying to make sure that we get the right, the right services at the right time. So we'd have to work some of that out, but I think at this point we're not able to really leverage any of DPW. So again, it's not off the table for the future, but I would say if we want to get started on this, there isn't really anything we could leverage there.
Did you consider any, so that's really helpful on the DPW alternative. That gives me some useful information there. Did you consider any other tiers of kind of quality of maintenance, and that, if this is, getting on a scale of 10, getting fields to quality 8 or 9, maybe something that gets fields to quality 5 or 6? Is that something that was considered?
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of the reason to look at these tiers, right? That came from PJC to try and do a sanity check. Like, what should we be doing now? Again, we could be doing nothing, right? We could just say, look, the whatever's left over from the rec budget at the end of the year is what we put into the fields, right? And then we're going to pretty consistently get the types of fields that we have. Anything, more grass is always good, right? So if we, $5,000 more is better than not having $5,000. But if you really look at what the cost is to maintain these fields, like we're grossly underfunded. I would say the 135 is even that, after looking at the responses from the RFPs, would still be underfunded. So, again, it just comes down to, does the town want good playing fields or not? And that's, my responsibility is to put the proposal out there, and, it's a town, I guess, up to the town to decide if they want it. But when people come to me and they say, hey, why are our fields in the condition that they're in? It really comes down to how much are we investing in them?
Natalie?
Dave, I just had a question. Last year, there was talk of resurfacing Laurel Fields. Is this plan, and I might have missed this along the way, is this plan trying to remediate, the degradation of your fields that you were trying to fix last year with that? Or you still need to do that in the future, do something? I'm just trying to figure out if this is, people said they didn't want tires on there. So is this the green plan instead of the tires, or is it just maintenance?
I mean, I think both the proposal last year and this is to trying to get better playing surfaces for the kids, right? They're rutted, they're not consistent. You heard coaches say they can't even play playoff games. They're always away because our fields are in such poor condition. They're not allowed to play their playoff games at Laurel. So this isn't
and this would fix
get us
that.
there. Yeah. I mean, it'll take years. It's not like this is an annual increase in the budget, right? It will take years to get it to, being a nice, beautiful, lush field. But again, I think that's they would be on par with the towns around us.
Okay.
Jane?
Yeah, just to follow up a little on Dan's point, since this is such a significant increase that's being proposed from the current amount of money that's allocated, did we even get a proposal on what, say, a tier 2 medium management program would look like, or did we only get the tier 1 proposal?
Yeah, no, everything is cost per acre, right? It all comes down to and application. So if we looked at I mean, if the irony is if we did exactly what PJC recommends for tier 2, because of the, some of the other services like the aeration and so forth, it actually ends up being a little bit higher. But yeah, we could actually, you can cost it out. You could say, because all of the proposals come back at how many applications do you want, or how many times do you want it done, how many acres do you need covered, and you can say, look, we can cut back on the aerations, right? And that will save us money. We can cut back on the amount of seeding that we do. That will save us money. So there's anything from what we're doing today, which is essentially what, like I said, whatever's left over in the budget, just to trying to properly fund the maintenance of the fields.
So I assume what you got was an itemized, so that if you could take out one or two fertilizers or 1 or 2 aerations, and then you know exactly what it would cost.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, the prices keep going up, right? So even at the request, if we got the full amount that we're requesting, we're still going to have to make do. There may be times we have to cut out seeding, right, in a given year because the cost is so high. There may be times we have to, aerate just a smaller portion of the field, maybe the areas that are more used, right? So we're going to have to manage the money either way and decide what are the things that need to be done, and what are the things that that we can cut out in order to make sure that we stick within the what we have for the budget.
Dave, is irrigation required to make this all work?
So irrigation is not required. We did put in a request for ARPA to sort of potentially use some of that money to fund an irrigation over Laurel specifically. But some years there's enough rain, and obviously grass is growing there today, both at Laurel and Fezzi and Jameson. So it's not required. We'll get a better yield if we did have irrigation though. So when you put grass down, you're kind of left to, particularly at Laurel, you're left to Mother Nature and hope that you get enough, enough rain to have it germinate. But you don't leave it to chance if you have irrigation.
All right. Any other discussion from advisory? I mean, ultimately, the way that I see this is that, I mean, and you can correct me if this is not an accurate characterization, Dave, but, essentially going off of what Natalie was saying, to a degree, this is a response to the town's rejection of your turf field proposal last year for Laurel, right? I mean, it's not exactly because this is a management for all of the town's fields and not just Laurel, but essentially you're saying, okay, well, you rejected that proposal. A lot of the people who were against said, why don't we come up with something that is natural and organic and just has, is natural turf. And so effectively you are saying, okay, well, here is a proposal, and that if we want to maintain only natural turf throughout all of the fields, and we want to still improve the quality, which everybody seemed to agree we do need to do something. Well, now here is a plan for it, right? And it costs a lot of money. And that's the point, is that we hadn't been doing anything and the fields are degrading. And like you said, it's for the town to decide, and I think what's going to happen is that, I guarantee you I'm going to call a hold on this, or somebody will call a hold on this budget at the hearing, and it's going to be a separate discussion amongst advisory. It's going to be a public comment, and then it's going to be a separate vote. I don't know exactly how advisory is going to vote on that. It's too late right now for me to want to have that discussion tonight, because we're just going to rehash it again at the hearing. So there will be a vote, and it will be either up or down. And then at the town meeting, the same thing's going to happen, is that somebody is going to call a hold on this budget, and there's going to be a discussion, and the town is going to vote to, you have to convince the town that this is what everybody wants, and the town's going to have a vote on it. That's basically how I see this going, because it's a lot of money, and I'm like, I see the reason why, and I can see the value in it. You know, but it's a lot of money, and the town's going to have to decide if they want to spend this amount of money every year on their fields. All right, any other advisory comments or discussion? Jane, your hand is still up. Is that just leftover? All right. All right. Thank you very much, Dave. I greatly appreciate all of the work and effort that you put into this.
Thank you.
Truly do. Thank you. All right, on to the capital item funding sources. I am going to, all right, let me try to. All right, I think the easiest way to do this is probably for me to just bring up the current draft warrant, and then we'll go through each of the items. All right, so this is the latest draft, which I believe I have forwarded to you all. All right, so I guess we've sort of had the discussion that I wanted to have at this point about the general climate for debt service coming up. And Heidi, you can chime in if you want more specifics added, but essentially the point is that we have a lot of, we've been collecting a lot of debt, and there's a lot more coming down the road in the next few years. And they're all somewhat non-negotiable things like roofs and fire trucks. You know, fire trucks maybe can get pushed off a little bit, but we're going to buy a fire truck sometime in the next several years, and it's going to be very expensive, like $1 million. And we're going to be replacing or, you know, repairing whatever 3 school roofs. And there's basically, I think Heidi is saying it's like $2 million a year for the next several years. So it's a concern. And I think that's why we're now looking towards trying to ease some of that by using free cash. Our free cash number is pretty high right now. And so where last year we basically paid for everything that we possibly could with borrowing, I think this year we're trying to collect some of these things with free cash. So item number 1, elder housing window replacement. We already know that that's going to be a borrowing, but that the elder housing revolving fund is planning on servicing that debt. So just want to make sure nobody has any concerns about that one. All right, item 2, gate and fence replacement. We already discussed that's going to be free cash. Item 2B, the Maple Street Roundabout, that's going to be borrowing. It's going to be somewhere in the $100,000 to $200,000 range is what Sean said. Town buildings is going to be borrowing for $190. Stormwater is going to be borrowing. DPW equipment for $35,000 is going to be free cash. Roadway management, that number actually now is up to $500,000. It's going to be borrowing. Tree removal has to be free cash. All right, now we're the remainder here: fire department, police department, and school committee. So the fire department breathing apparatus for $65,000. I believe Heidi's got that down for free cash. So I wanted to open up for discussion. And Heidi, I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick reminder, the town buildings, not town buildings, the
roadway was split,
yeah, roadway,
right?
He wants split.
Yeah.
The $500,000 total, and you know, I'm suggesting maybe 200 free cash, 300 borrowing, but that just a split vote on that.
Yeah. And I presume that by the time of town meeting, we'll have more clarity on all of the other numbers. And so if you feel that you've got enough cushion to give Sean the 250 he asked for, we could always do that. Basically, right? Correct. Okay. That'll be fun drafting all of those motions. Great. So the fire department breathing apparatus, 65,000 free cash. Any objections to that, or questions or comments? I'm okay with that. Utility terrain vehicle, I believe that's actually coming off of the warrant because the plan is to use the, what do you call it, the surplus equipment revolving fund.
That's correct.
So that is not going to be free cash or borrowing. 6A, the police cruiser. This one is also down for free cash right now. I had a question because I don't remember if it was you, Heidi, or if it was Chief Galvin who had discussed the possibility of a lease for this. So I didn't know, is the plan actually to lease this or is it to buy it outright?
I believe the plan right now is to buy it outright at this point.
Okay. If we were to go with a leasing option, what would the payment look like for that? Would that be something that we just used free cash each year, or would that be something that came out of an operating budget, or?
That would
See,
come out of
that's-
the operating budget.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right, but for now it's purchasing outright with free cash. Anybody from advisory have any objection to that or questions or comments?
Steve, I was just going to mention there was a little talk kind of in the realm of rumor speculation that possibly the window replacement was going to end up waiting a year.
Oh.
Nothing certain, unclear, just a little loose talk about that.
Okay, and that was started by the Elder Housing Committee or by capital budget?
I think they put it out to bid, at least got one super high bid. Deb, help me out here if you remember something different. Got one super high bid and we're just trying to figure out where they were going to go. And it wasn't at all settled. It may be just like it is here, but I just wanted to mention that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. They got one high bid from like the top line of Pella or something like that. So he was looking,
Pella.
Yeah, he was looking for another bid. But he was uncertain if he was going to be able to get it in time.
Okay. Okay. All right, but okay, so police cruiser, free cash, everyone's okay with that. Pine Hill School, I believe that was like some flooring and stuff like that, right? At the elementary school.
Yeah, that actually went down to 68,000.
Okay.
Instead of 6 classrooms, they're doing 4 classrooms.
Okay. And that one, I guess we have down as borrowing. Is that right, Heidi?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I'm just wondering, is there other than just some things have to go one way and some things have to go the other? Or is there a particular thought process behind this one being borrowing and not free cash, as opposed to say the breathing apparatus or the police cruiser, which are, comparable size?
Right. The police cruiser, usually you can say a lifespan of 4 years, 4 to 5 years. So that was shorter. The flooring, you can actually have a much, much longer lifespan.
Okay.
So we could go 10. The breathing apparatus is probably 5 to 10 years. So I just figured the flooring had a longer lifespan.
Longer lifespan. Okay, that
Yep.
makes sense to me. Anyone else from advisory have any objections, questions, or comments?
Question, if we add up all of the potential free cash purchases here, which is, if I did it correctly, it's a little over 500,000, 531 odd thousand. And then we take the other supplementals and the OPEB contribution, and I'm trying to think what else is in the mix. Where does that put us in terms of what our percentage of free cash left over would be at that point? Oh, thank you. That's great.
You mean like this?
Perfect.
Thank you, Heidi. Heidi gave me this right before the meeting.
Except any chance you can make it a little bigger.
Yeah. Let me see here. Let's
You can just focus on the brown that has the whole total.
Okay.
this right here.
Yeah, and that was just estimates because I just put placeholders in for a snow and ice, police overtime, whatever, and counting 5% rollover amount would leave us with about 235,000 in free cash remaining unspent if we did all the projects we just mentioned. Sean's 200,000 would come off of that as well. That's why I wasn't quite wanting to go to 250. I was trying to stay maybe closer to 200, so it leave 35,000. But if the trees, 150,000 goes to ARPA, that could almost be a trade coming out. But that's the breakdown if we did all the items from free cash.
And that, and
I'm sorry.
that's
trees-
pretty,
Okay.
oh, I'm sorry, that's a little generous because there is no other bills. There's no prior year bills. So
There
you
was
can
one
take-
other category, yeah, I didn't have that you had mentioned. That's why I still kept it. I just made it other bills right now.
You have
There
it?
was some other item.
Police overtimes, no, snow and ice police overtime. What is the third one?
Yeah, there was one other, you mentioned the other
There-
day and I said, oh, I didn't
Yeah,
have it.
yeah, there's three. I can't remember what the other third supplemental is at.
Yeah,
this
so
point in
that's why I
time.
just stuck that in as other bills because the totals were close to what you had
Oh,
mentioned.
nice.
We know, are we over 100,000 on snow and ice yet?
No, we're not.
Okay.
That was prior to last weekend.
Yeah.
You know,
So we
there
don't
was-
have the receipts in yet for last weekend.
No, I'll have that next week.
Okay. And then are we over 100,000 on police overtime?
That was just an estimate based on their current run rate.
Okay.
Run rate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
About that, the police overtime, because it looked from the latest run rate, it looked like there was actually going to be quite a bit of a surplus perhaps in the police budget. And if that's true, and the surplus could fund the overtime, would we still do a supplemental?
We wouldn't have to.
Yeah. I know that came up last year and we did the supplemental anyway. and we were kinda
Yeah, we
scratching
did.
Our heads and saying, why did we do that?
Yeah.
Are
last-
we, yeah, will we have more clarity on that before town meeting?
Well, we'll have, one more month of,
Yeah.
expenses. The only difference is like the first couple, Chief Galvin came on in November, I believe. So he doesn't have a full year of salary, but every month now, the monthly expenditure is a little higher than it was
Oh,
the first
right.
3 months. But I can take a look at that tomorrow.
Yeah, would you be able to
And-
take a look and just see with Chief Galvin's salary now, if you were to project the sort of current average
Yeah, sure.
monthly expense out to the end of the year, whether if the police would still be running a surplus, then it would be good to pull that off of the free cash expenditure.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Because yeah, like Jane said, last year was a little silly to have paid for police overtime and then the police department had a surplus.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so if we can avoid that and then give this free cash number a bit of a cushion, that would be good.
Yeah.
And Steve, I did ask the Department of Local Services, what happens if we vote the trees 150,000 for free cash and then later on it's decided ARPA funds will be available for it? We can rescind the free cash vote at the next town meeting and then it will roll back onto free cash the next time.
Oh, you can rescind the free cash vote?
Yes, I did not
Oh,
know that, but
good.
you can. And they did put it in writing. I printed off that
Okay.
email.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, well, that's good to know.
What percentage is that? If let's say it's the 235, I mean, it looks like there's going to be some changes there, but is it too early to project that?
What do you mean, what percentage?
What percentage of free cash would we have? We try to stay in the 3 to 5% range.
Oh, I have it right in there. There's a 5%
Yeah.
rollover.
So she's accounting
155.
for holding free cash at 5%.
Okay, sorry. I missed
So in the upper left-hand corner, I have the free cash ratios amount, like on a budget of 31 million, whatever, 3, 4, 5. And we come in just over 8% of free cash total is what we got from our budget this year. So essentially, we're trying to spend 3% to keep maintaining 5 to roll over, because we want to maintain 3 to 5% every year, and you will start with what you didn't spend last year would roll over.
And with the audit, maybe, I don't know if this is the right question to be asking, but we've had discussions in the past. There was a period in the past when we spent a lot of free cash, and that was something that had been noted by S&P. And Peter, you had indicated, last time that it was really more that the balances were going down that was concerning them. I mean, do we know if we spend at this level, how that calculation will look from an S&P perspective?
Not yet, because I haven't seen the final audit yet to go through and try and run some of those numbers. I have to be able to look at that audit and see what they're saying. Quick glance, it looks better than last year. As far as where we're standing, it's not as good as prior years, but it's better than the last 2 years.
And I believe also the plan, the hope is that at some point after the town meeting, but before, what was it, August, Heidi, that some informal group that is probably going to be Dan and or Peter and or Mark will probably work with Heidi on trying to figure out exactly what is what S&P has actually been dinging us on and what the cause is and whether we have truly rectified it or not, just to try to make sure that we aren't in, because whatever it was that we did, it was clearly inadvertent. We weren't trying to be sneaky and got caught.
Right.
We were all like, what are you talking about? So
Right.
we just
No.
want to make sure that we aren't inadvertently continuing to do the same.
Right. No, they have 6 categories they rate you on, from, adequate, strong, very strong. And in the prior one, we had been 4 categories of very strong, and two adequates. And we went down to only having 3 very strong, 1 strong, and 2 adequates. So I'm concerned about, we are going to do the long-term bond. It's going to be moved up actually to July because of the interest rates right now. We're trying to get it in quicker before more rate increases. So there will be an S&P call in June. So right after the town meeting, I will be talking to you, Steve, and seeing if we can start getting that together.
All right. Well, the resident advisory financial brain trust, be ready to be called on.
That's right.
So have we looked at S&P's last review in light of the spending that we're proposing now, and to see if we're repeating some of the less favorable?
Well, one of the less favorable aspects is what amount of debt you retire within 10 years, the percentage. And they like to see, over 70% of debt is retired within 10 years. Unfortunately, the projects that we are putting into debt are not working in our favor. So I think when I quickly glanced at the number, we talked about it, we're about 74% this last year. However, with the next debt we'll be issuing, which is going to be primarily library and some long-term ones, which are 20-year ones, we will be dropping down into the 60% range, which is below what they would like a AAA community to have. But we can't control that number. And unfortunately, that's what's coming down the pike here is the long-term debt. But that's only one factor, which is why I want to have a group meeting afterwards, not for tonight, another discussion when we go through and look at the 6 factors. Are there any other factors we can try and work on to strengthen?
Well, we have that report now, don't we?
Not the Standard & Poor one. I don't have the audit one. We're getting the final, Deb's going to have the final audit this week.
Right, but the last Standard & Poor's report.
Yes, it's published online. It's online under the Treasurer's Department.
So we're not violating any of the sightings, either good, bad, or indifferent, from that report in the spending proposed now or the debt we're incurring now.
Until I see what the impact from last year has and run some numbers on it, I cannot weigh in on that.
Yeah, I think I imagine, Peter, ultimately, I think ultimately the problem is that I think we're still not exactly sure what it was that was causing those ratings, right? I mean, if it was very clear that they were like, you did X, Y, and Z, stop that, it would be very easy to be like, look, we stopped doing X, Y, and Z.
Right.
But I think,
And
I think we're not really sure what X, Y, and Z were.
no, and we're getting a better handle. The problem also is how they started treating the OPEB liability and carrying that onto the books had changed like 3 or 4 years ago, which has impacted, you know, we had a Standard & Poor rating in 18 and the Standard & Poor rating in 20. So we haven't had one since, and, you know, they are sporadic.
Okay, but let's try to clear out this agenda item, which is the discussion of the capital item spending. I believe we ran through the entire list, and effectively, I think we went with Heidi's recommendations down across the board. So unless there's any further comment or discussion about that, I'd like to close out this agenda item. Okay. All right, and I believe that's it, other than previous meeting minutes. Let's see here. All right, can everyone see that? And as usual, this is my first time reading through, but if anybody has any comments or changes, please feel free to just call them out. Just gonna correct that spelling.
So on this one, Article 31.
Yeah.
I don't believe Marion Neutra was responding for the planning board. Jane caught this one. I think she was just speaking as a citizen.
Oh, yes.
Thanks, Jane.
All right, I have no additional edits. Anybody else? All right, if not, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the Sherborn Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, March 9th, 2022, as edited on screen?
So moved.
Second.
All right, let's vote. Mark? Dan?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Wasim? Wasim fall asleep. Brendan?
Yeah, him and Dan are gone.
Brendan?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Nat?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye. I guess we'll call Wasim an abstain. So that would be 7-0-1.
I move to adjourn.
All righty.
Second.
All right. Mark?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Brendan?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
And that's 5. We're out of here. 10:39 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Good night, guys. Sorry I
Have a
stepped
good
away
night.
for a sec. All right, goodbye.